Chapter 1097. This kind of sober reaction was not so much a shock, but rather a panic. This Xiang Yun also had to be added to the list of resistance. Looking at Xiang Yun's evil smile, Wang Ling fell into deep thought. He was sure that this doctor had probably noticed something and knew that Wang Ling was pretending to be dead, so he had deliberately arranged for the show just now. But it probably wasn't possible for him to see through Wang Ling's tricks. It was more likely that this school doctor had been guessing for many years. In short, this Xiang Yun was a dangerous person. It was better to pay more attention to him in the future. Xiang Yun crouched down to check Wang Ling's condition again, then confirmed with the teachers around him, "There's no problem anymore." That was a stressful situation just now. Young people are in good health, so there's a chance that they'll recover on their own. If they're older and have a lower realm, they'll need assistance. As long as classmate Wang Ling is fine, that's good. The teachers finally relaxed. Only the male teacher who had been about to rescue Wang Ling just now looked gloomy. "What's wrong, Teacher Li?" "Hey, I still don't understand. Should I stick out my tongue for CPR? How about we let classmate Wang Ling lie down again and we can study it in depth?" Everyone. "Wang Ling, there's a limit to joking. Wang Ling is my student, so I'm taking him away. The rest of you, go and take care of classmate Xia Ming." Teacher Pan stood up again at this critical moment. Of course she knew that this Teacher Li was actually joking. Teacher Li Renyong had a habit of making jokes regardless of the occasion. Thus, under Teacher Pan's protection, Wang Ling was taken back to the office. Teacher Pan took out a form from a drawer and gave it to Wang Ling. At the top of the form was Domestic Violence Questionnaire. "Wang Ling, classmate Wang Ling, I actually wanted to inform your parents to come to school this time. But I never thought that they wouldn't be worried about your health at all." Teacher Pan sighed, then looked at Wang Ling and said earnestly, "Tell me honestly, have your parents ever been violent towards you at home?" "Wang Ling, Teacher Pan, don't be afraid, I'm here. If someone is violent towards you at home, you must be brave enough to say it." Wang Ling wanted to cry but had no tears. Violence, there really wasn't. Father and Mother Wang had been too good to him since he was a child, and practically cherished him in the palm of their hands. Instead, Wang Ling felt a little apologetic for taking such good care of his parents. But Father and Mother Wang indeed had no other choice. Not long after Wang Ling was born, their whole family had moved to such a remote villa in the suburbs so that they wouldn't cause trouble for their neighbors. Think about it, if you were to live with a nuclear bomb in your arms every day, you would probably be on tenterhooks every day. He shook his head. He couldn't possibly say something that didn't exist. Father and Mother Wang were very good to him. It would be even better if Father Wang didn't find an excuse to dock his allowance. Teacher Pan clearly had some misunderstanding about Father and Mother Wang, and it would be fine as long as she made things clear. Wang Ling hadn't expected old Pan to be so concerned about him at the start of the semester. This was a good thing. At the very least, it proved Teacher Pan's sense of responsibility as a teacher of the people. But for Wang Ling, too much concern was trouble. He just wanted to be an ordinary student and finish his high school life peacefully. "Classmate Wang Ling, don't be afraid. Cold violence is also violence," Teacher Pan said very seriously. Wang Ling, not good at expressing himself in words, Wang Ling could only lower his head and start to fill in the survey form. He used his superb writing skills for high school exams to express Father and Mother Wang's meticulous care for him since he was a child. There was a pattern to writing for exams, and Wang Ling could analyze and summarize it. He could predict in advance what angle the teacher marking the papers liked to start from. Some were emotional, some were creative, some were elaborate, some were realistic, and some were close to life. Wang Ling had a hunch that Teacher Pan liked to read more emotional things, so he turned this essay, attached to the heartfelt thoughts column, into a chicken soup essay. Thus, Wang Ling's essay was littered with golden sentences. 1. My parents are like candles. They give off a little heat and give off a little light, giving people light and warmth. And I am like a small flame, so weak that I can be accidentally blown out. Alluding to Father Wang docking my allowance. 2. My father's love is like a heavy mountain and a luxuriant tree, sheltering me from wind and rain. As for me, I am like a bird in the tree, although sometimes his branches carelessly scrape off my feathers. Alluding to Father Wang docking my allowance. 3. My dearest dad, we can't be apart for even a moment. Our family is like the 3 auspicious treasures. Although sometimes his love is too binding for me, like the old lord's immortal binding rope, which puts pressure on me. Alluding to Father Wang docking my allowance, after reading this essay, Teacher Pan's eyes instantly turned red. She almost choked with sobs as she said to Wang Ling, "Student Wang Ling, I already know, don't worry. It's getting late, let's go home." Wang Ling didn't know whether Teacher Pan had correctly obtained the information he had provided, but he believed that there shouldn't be any problems. He had already written so emotionally, but he was just secretly ridiculing Father Wang for docking his allowance. But the truth was that not long after Wang Ling returned home, Teacher Pan had taken a photo of his thoughts and sent it to the number 60 High Teachers group chat. No. 60 High Teachers Management Group, Talismans, Teacher Pan, picture. This was written by Wang Ling from our class, everyone take a look. P.E., Teacher Yi, ah? Teacher Pan suspects that student Wang Ling has been subjected to domestic violence? Talismans, Teacher Pan, that's right, so I had him fill out a questionnaire. But from the questionnaire, it doesn't seem that student Wang Ling has been subjected to domestic violence, and even left such a touching essay. I cried when I read it. This child has a grateful heart, and knows that it isn't easy for his parents. Unfortunately, this is a private investigation, so I have to help Wang Ling keep this essay a secret. Otherwise, I think it could be displayed publicly. P.E., Teacher Yi, I've finished reading it, it's really well written. History, Teacher Wang, not bad, not bad. This level of awareness and thinking is indeed a good child. I taught Wang Ling, and he's always been very well behaved in class. No wonder classmate Lotus Sun likes him. School doctor, Xiang Yiyun, my opinion is different from everyone's. I think student Wang's essay is a hint. All the teachers? School doctor, Xiang Yiyun, look, he compares his parents to candles, his father to tree branches, and finally mentions the immortal binding rope. Teacher Yi quickly reacted, you mean, wax dripping, whip and bondage? School doctor, Xiang Yiyun, facepalm, I never said that. I was just joking. At that moment, Teacher Pan, who was staring at the screen, looked nervous again. A hint? Teacher Pan felt that it wasn't impossible. Chapter 1098. Wang Ling would never have thought that his little essay, in which he secretly accused Father Wang of docking his allowance, would actually be shared publicly in a teacher's group, and that it would be forcibly interpreted. In most cases, a lot of people felt helpless when it came to this kind of forced interpretation. But teachers were magical creatures. Language teachers in particular could often extract information from an author's essays that even the original author himself didn't know. For example, a certain sentence and a certain sentence repeatedly mentioned a certain adjective, expressing the author's feelings. Maybe it was just that the author didn't have enough ink in his head, which was why he used the same adjective repeatedly. Another example was an exclamation mark at the end of a certain sentence, expressing the author's feelings. The truth was that for an author, the ending symbol at the end of their writing depended purely on their mood. For example, when you read this sentence, you would notice that there was an exclamation mark at the end. But in order to come up with a topic, teachers would always try to figure out the original author's meaning. Unfortunately, Wang Ling had been misunderstood just like that. When Wang Ling got home in the evening, Father Wang left 35 yuan and 68 cents on the table, along with a note. The eel department has organized for the author to take his wife to watch the blockbuster movie My Motherland and Me. The money on the table is just enough for you to order a pretty good takeout. Your mom and I have already inspected the shop closest to our house. It's clean and hygienic, and the bento is very nutritious. A nutritious assorted bento costs 35 yuan and 68 cents. Please use this money to order takeout. The corner of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. Father Wang was as stingy as ever. But this was a normal operation, and Wang Ling was already used to it. In fact, there was clearly mobile payment, but it wasn't accurate to the Jiao unit when transferring money, so Father Wang simply put cash on the table in order to use up the family's cash. Under the leadership of the two boss Ma's, mobile payment in Huaxiu Nation had reached its peak. The convenience of mobile payment meant that practically everyone only needed to take their phone with them when they went out. During the new year, thieves who went out to work couldn't even steal wallets, and could only steal other people's phones. The problem was that most people nowadays never left their phones. The birth of mobile payment also had a huge impact on pickpockets and other professions. At the same time, many people had gotten used to using mobile payments, and cash had gradually left them behind. Before mobile payments had been so convenient, part of Father Wang's royalties had been sent in envelopes. Thus, over the years, Father Wang had accumulated a lot of cash at home. Father Wang had thought of depositing money in the bank before, but when he thought that it would be very troublesome if he still needed cash in the future, he would have to go to the bank to withdraw it again, so he simply left it all at home. Now, this cash was mainly used for Wang Ling's monthly allowance, as well as for trivial household expenses, such as grocery shopping, express delivery fees and so on. In addition, Father Wang would sometimes find an excuse to dock Wang Ling's allowance, so he had never been able to use all the cash that had accumulated up until now. He put the money on the table into his pocket and went to his bedroom. Father Wang's study was right across from Wang Ling's bedroom. When he reached the door, Wang Ling noticed a piece of paper on the floor, which Father Wang had probably accidentally dropped when he left. This piece of paper was densely filled with all kinds of analytical data and diagrams. The header was, Prenatal Examination Analysis Report. Wang Ling examined the report carefully. Name, Wang Yilan. Age, 38. Fetal position. During the examination, the fetus was found to be constantly rolling around in the body, and there is a small probability that the umbilical cord will become entangled. A regular follow-up next month is recommended to rule out this risk. Physical condition. Physical condition is good. Pregnant women are in good health due to appropriate exercise, and are very suitable for childbirth. Furthermore, because of their experience with natural childbirth, the doctor recommended natural childbirth. Finally, at the end of the report, Wang Ling found that after Mother Wang's prenatal examination last night, the hospital had given her due date of delivery, December 30th. This December 30th wasn't the 30th of next year, and it was next month. This absolutely wasn't because the hospital had used some black technology to force the fetus to mature early in the mother's body, but purely because the nutrition in the cultivation world was too good. In the last few days, Mother Wang had taken a lot of health supplements to protect the fetus and nourish the fetus. Some of them had been bought by her, while others had been given to her by Odd Joie and Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. These tonics were all priceless elixirs on the market, but Mother Wang ate them all, which directly led to her expected delivery date being brought forward significantly. Plus, the little girl in her womb wasn't easy to deal with to begin with. Even if Mother Wang didn't use these supplements, her due date would still be greatly advanced. In fact, it was very common for the estimated delivery date to be advanced in the cultivation world under normal circumstances. The problem was that it would usually only be advanced by 3 to 5 months. Even the doctors in the hospital were shocked when they saw the forecast report. They were able to see 9 months' worth of time in one go. It was as if this fetus couldn't wait to come into the world, it was growing too fast. It was like the enemy jungler was still farming the first group of wild monsters, while the enemy jungler had already eaten all the wild monsters on the other side as well as their own, and was directly ahead in experience by a whole 9 levels. Looking at the report, Wang Ling was suddenly very curious about where he had been born. He read from the report that Mother Wang had experience in natural childbirth. That was to say, he had also been born naturally back then. But Wang Ling realized that his memory of it was a little fuzzy. He did remember things very early, but he only had a vague image of himself in his mother's womb. To be exact, he only remembered that he had taken his first breath of fresh air before he started to remember. Out of curiosity, Wang Ling couldn't help but want to see what he had looked like when he had been born. He went to the basement and started to rummage through the images Father Wang had taken with the image bead. Wang Ling remembered what Father Wang had said before. In order to commemorate that moment, he had prepared a long time in advance, and had completely recorded Mother Wang's delivery process in the operating room. Using the ability of his king's eye to search the entire basement, Wang Ling finally found the image bead which Father Wang had mentioned. The year and date were engraved on it. It was the year and day of Wang Ling's birth. Injecting spirit energy into the bead, Wang Ling quickly saw Mother Wang's sweaty face in the operating room, as well as Father Wang's snot and tears which gushed out like crazy. At that time, Father Wang had really been too excited. Chapter 1099. More than once, Wang Ling had heard about his birth from Mother Wang. She had said that his birth wasn't much different from an ordinary child's, and that there wasn't much to say, but Wang Ling still didn't quite believe it. This time, Wang Ling watched the video he had recorded back then, and had a general understanding of his own birth. The image bead recorded Father and Mother Wang's slightly immature looks back then. Their faces were still very young, and there weren't many crow's feet left at the corners of Mother Wang's eyes. Whether it was a man or a woman, being in their 30s was actually an age when they were in the prime of their lives and could achieve great things. Wang Ling's heart instantly ached when he saw Mother Wang's sweaty forehead in the image bead. A long time ago, giving birth was like passing through the gates of hell. Now that science and technology had advanced, there were all kinds of methods to smoothly deliver a child. Some people couldn't bear the pain and chose to perform a C-section. In Wang Ling's opinion, Mother Wang was simply a heroine among women. Throughout the delivery process, in addition to the cheers of the nurses on the side, there was also Mother Wang's forceful voice, which seemed to be unexpectedly harmonious. However, after this process lasted for a few minutes, a nurse suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God! It's out, it's out." Logically speaking, the nurses in the obstetrics and gynecology department had witnessed many births, so they shouldn't be so emotional. However, the scene in front of them made these nurses feel shocked. What happened? Nurse Wang was so tired that she was sweating, but she did feel a sense of relief in her lower body, as if she had been constipated for a long time, and the burden on her body was suddenly lifted. She saw the shocked expressions on the faces of the doctors and nurses around her, and became even more curious about the situation in front of her. What the hell is going on? Is it a man or a woman? It's a boy. A nurse calmed herself down and rubbed her eyes. But this child seems to have crawled out on his own. Yes, back then, although Wang Ling had only gained consciousness after taking his first breath of fresh air, the legend of a magical baby who had crawled out of the womb had indeed been left behind in the obstetrics and gynecology hospital back then. It was just that at that time, he didn't have a name yet. He actually crawled out of Mother Wang's belly by himself. Even Wang Ling himself was very surprised by this result. After all, his body could indeed reflect the scene of Wang Wan's birth a month later. Who knew how this troublemaking little girl would break out of her shell? After tossing the homework to the two gremlins, he started to look through his WeChat chat history. In fact, since old Pan had let him go, he hadn't stopped receiving messages. Some had come to warm him up, and some were more concerned about the outcome of the battle between him and Xiaoming. This matter was known by too many people, and it had spread far and wide. It would have a great impact on him for a period of time to come. It was obviously unrealistic to expect time to dilute everything. Moreover, because the video had already spread out, it was unrealistic to visit them one by one to erase their memories. In an online environment, the influence of a video was sometimes difficult to estimate. Not to mention a video, even a sentence could have a very important impact. For example, the NBA incident that happened recently. Because of the shocking words of a team manager, the entire NBA environment was in turmoil. Then did this MOLA do it on purpose? Wang Ling felt that this might be a deliberate move by the other party. Because looking at the entire situation, this team manager was the biggest beneficiary. Wouldn't a person with a super high salary, a better understanding of the culture and bottom line of each country, and an extremely high degree consider the consequences of his words in the future? Wang Ling felt that this person's craftiness lay in dragging an entire industry down with him for his own personal benefit, brazenly using freedom of speech as a shield, which was truly comical. It wasn't Wang Ling's place to comment on this. In any case, it was fine to just know that this person was shameless. Back then, the NBA had paid a huge price to open Huaxiao Nation's doors. Now, because of a retarded comment on a social media platform, the NBA had slammed the doors shut. Not only that, the NBA's president had even gone to the trouble of putting a few locks on the doors afterwards. It had to be known that no matter what was missing from the world, it would still go on. It wasn't like you couldn't live without the NBA. Watching volleyball and learning the spirit of the women's volleyball team, watching table tennis and enjoying a hell level of fancy performance, wouldn't that be even more carefree? Wang Ling didn't reply to anyone else's messages. Although he had added a lot of people on WeChat, a lot of them had been attracted by his reputation recently. Wang Ling felt that it would be too impolite to refuse them or give them the cold shoulder, so he might as well add them and leave them hanging. Some people would ask for a rebuff and then delete him from their friend list. Wang Ling usually only replied to people he was familiar with on WeChat. For example, the current four-person group consisting of Super Chin, Dopigua, Little Peanut and himself. How are you going to deal with classmate Lotus Sun's matter? Super Chin asked with concern. For a while at the start of school, Super Chen had also been one of Lotus Sun's pursuers, but later, there had been too many people pursuing her, so he had chosen to give up. There were too many competitors, and Super Chen felt that his chances of winning were too low, so he hadn't done much. To Super Chen, working hard for something unseen and illusory was a very stupid thing to do. If he had the time and energy, he would rather spend it on training his muscles. After all, the lines of his muscles would only become clearer the more he trained. I haven't thought about it yet, Wang Ling replied. He knew that he would have to think of a way to deal with this matter sooner or later, and it was likely that there would be another fierce battle tomorrow, that classmate Xia Ming definitely wouldn't let him off. As for Lotus Sun, Wang Ling still didn't know what on earth this girl was thinking. Although she had confessed to him in reverse, Lotus Sun herself had become the most mysterious one, and until now, she had been hiding at home and refusing to meet him. Tomorrow was Friday, and how this matter would be handled in the end would in fact depend on how Lotus Sun wanted to handle it. And as the focus of this matter, Wang Ling could only go with the flow and take it one step at a time. Friday, November 7th, Huaguo Water Curtain Group. A limousine appeared at the gate of number 60 high school, and an old man with a cane and hands full of gold and silver slowly got out of the car. Bodyguards stood in front of him and behind him. Old man, this is the place, an attendant said to the old man. A lot of people were astonished when they saw the old man's identity. This was the current chairman of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, Sunny Yuan. Chapter 1100. As the topic's heroine, student Lotus Sun still hadn't come to school today. What was unexpected was that instead of student Lotus Sun, her grandfather had actually come. This chairman of Huaguo Water Curtain Group was a force to be reckoned with wherever he went. Old man Sun had acted suddenly this time, and no one had anticipated it. Otherwise, the school gate would have been surrounded by reporters from various major media outlets before the old man had arrived. Old man Sun hadn't come this time because he had nothing better to do, but because he had indeed come on official business. Number 60 High's renovation was about to start, and he had come to observe the school environment. Logically speaking, there was no need for a big shot at the board of directors to show up for the renovation of the school. It could just be handed over to the engineers under him. So the truth was that everyone in the school had a rough idea of the old man's true purpose. Seeing the old man's limousine stop at the school gate, Super Chen couldn't help crying out just by opening the window. Damn, Wang Ling, the chairman of Huaguo Water Curtain Group is here. A father-in-law inspecting a son-in-law. Wang Ling almost spat out the chocolate milk in his mouth when he heard this. What did he mean by a father-in-law inspecting a son-in-law? It hadn't been decided yet, right? Besides, Wang Ling himself didn't have much of an opinion. He could only take it one step at a time. Looking out the window, Wang Ling sighed in his heart. The streets around number 60 High had already been cordoned off, and Huaguo Water Curtain Group's bodyguards had them all surrounded. Of course, this cordoned off only targeted media reporters, and wouldn't affect ordinary people's normal travel. After learning that Sunny Yuan had arrived at the school gate, Headmaster Chen and Director Shi immediately went to the teachers' offices and had some teachers who weren't too busy come to the school gate to greet him. Mr. Sun, there's no need to honor us with your presence. At the school gate, Headmaster Chen took the initiative to shake Sun Yiyuan's hand. Old Man Sun returned the handshake symbolically and took a photo with Headmaster Chen. Wang Ling saw this scene from a distance by the window, and reckoned that this photo would very likely appear in No. 60 High's School History Museum one day in the future. Although No. 60 High's election as a key city high school was still on the agenda, any school had to acknowledge its historical value. This was a 100-year-old school that was hundreds or even thousands of years old. The combined age of the dozen or so cultivation schools in Peiyuan district could barely compare to No. 60 High. I've always been very concerned about the children's learning environment. Coming to No. 60 High this time, I realized that it was much better than I had imagined. It was just that it looked a little old, but the moment I stepped through the school gate, I smelled a thick scent of books. It's so nostalgic. Old Man Sun spoke of his feelings as his entourage recorded them in a small notebook. Every teacher who came out to welcome them was beaming with joy. As the chairman of the Huaguo Water Curtain Group, Old Master Sun Yiyuan had met many big shots. His ability to speak was naturally excellent, and it made people feel comfortable, like a spring breeze. Although Headmaster Chen couldn't compare to Old Man Sun, he knew that these were just polite words, so he didn't get carried away. Instead, he showed a gratified smile and made an inviting gesture. "Mr. Sun, please take a seat in my office." In the headmaster's office, Headmaster Chen poured a cup of tea for Old Man Sunday. This was the best tea he could offer. Old Man Sun took a whiff of the tea and frowned. Then, he took a symbolic sip and put down the teacup. Then, Old Man Sun said, "Given Rongrong's grades, we could have sent her to a better school back then. But it was Rongrong's own decision to study at No. 60 High, so I didn't stop her." Headmaster Chen nodded. Student Lotus Sun's grades are indeed outstanding. In our No. 60 High's history list, her grades are currently in the top 10. After all, she's my granddaughter, it's only natural for her to reach this standard. Old Man Sun was so happy that he couldn't hide the smile on his face at all. But the truth is that No. 60 High and my Huaguo Water Curtain Group also have a deep connection. Headmaster Chen. Old Man Sun, back then, there was a river called Beifeng in No. 60 High's location. Speaking up to this point, Headmaster Chen immediately understood. There is a river. It's a river from before No. 60 High was built. But later, as the climate changed, the riverbed dried up. In the end, this piece of land changed hands several times. First, it was developed into a mausoleum, and then it was reopened to build a school. That's right, that's it. Old Man Sun said, "Back then, my ancestor used the water of this Beifeng River to successfully refine the first pill. That's why I say that No. 60 High is actually fated with us." Headmaster Chen was blank when he heard this. He had never thought that there would be such a secret story between No. 60 High and Huaguo Water Curtain Group. My ancestor's first pill was refined here. This place can be used as a mausoleum and a school, so there's no need to say more about the feng shui of this land. So after 100 years, I've come here again to help No. 60 High with the new construction, so my ancestors' feelings for this land back then haven't been in vain, Old Man Sun said. After a few exchanges, the atmosphere gradually warmed up. Now that the topic had been opened, they could naturally talk about anything. The truth was that Old Man Sun had wanted to ask about Xia Ming and Wang Ling as soon as he entered the school gates. It was just that there had been too many people at the time, and he had been too embarrassed to ask. Now that they were sitting in the headmaster's office and the topic was open, Old Man Sun knew that the time had come to ask. "Well, Headmaster Chen, what do you think about Student Xia and Student Wang?" After laying the groundwork for a long time, Old Man Sun finally picked up the topic he wanted to ask. Headmaster Chen had already known that Old Man Sun was going to ask about this, and naturally had already prepared a script in his heart. "Don't worry, Mr. Sun, our school will definitely handle this matter impartially and teach Student Xia and Student Wang to focus their limited energy on their studies. It's normal for young people to be impulsive. Student Xia and Student Sun are both forthright people, so it's inevitable. As for Student Wang, he's actually a more introverted child." "He's introverted?" So he's from a single-parent family? Old Man Sun's interest was suddenly piqued when Wang Ling was mentioned. No, his parents are still alive. It could be that his family environment has influenced his character since he was young. But student Wang's grades are still very stable. Headmaster Chen wanted to say that Wang Ling was outstanding, but then remembered that Wang Ling's grades seemed to always be above average. Using the word outstanding was a little exaggerated. It was more appropriate to use stable to describe him. But as soon as he said it, Headmaster Chen regretted it a little. He felt that if it was just a matter of getting average grades for a period of time, that might be considered stable. But for a student who could always get average grades, it wasn't too much to describe him as outstanding. Chapter 1101. Headmaster Chen was an honest person, and he had always been modest and cautious. Now that he was facing old Master Sun Yuan, he felt that he should show even more humility. In fact, Wang Ling was indeed an outstanding student in Headmaster Chen's heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. On the contrary, he would instead talk about Wang Ling's shortcomings and mistakes. So what were Wang Ling's shortcomings and mistakes? Headmaster Chen thought about it carefully for a while. Apart from being too introverted, which couldn't really be considered a shortcoming, he really couldn't find anything to criticize student Wang Ling about. In all the years that No. 60 High School had been founded, Headmaster Chen felt that Wang Ling was the first student who had lived such a mediocre life. He had an average score in his exams, stood in the middle of the class queue, and it seemed that Wang Ling's ranking in all the team competitions seemed to be in the middle. According to Headmaster Chen, student Wang Ling is introverted. Does he have friends? Old Man Sun asked. Of course he does, Headmaster Chen replied. Actually, Headmaster Chen had paid attention to every student's social circle before this. He was more worried that there would be students who couldn't fit in and were isolated in the school environment. Isolated children were more likely to suffer from school violence. And school violence didn't necessarily involve physical violence. Cold violence was also a type of school violence. As headmaster, putting an end to school violence was an unshirkable responsibility. While it was important to teach and educate people, it was equally important to build their souls. He hoped that every student who graduated from No. 60 High School would leave in their third year of high school with good memories, and not with a shadow in their hearts. Furthermore, they would come back decades later to beat up or report their teachers, saying things like a gentleman's revenge was a dish best served cold. If he has friends, that proves that student Wang Ling has his own special charisma. Old Man Sun laughed, his impression of Wang Ling becoming a little clearer. Headmaster Chen didn't know what to say, and could only smile obsequiously. Previously, our school used to have an admission test system made from the remnant soul of a demon king's primordial spirit. At the start of the first semester, the demon king unexpectedly escaped. Fortunately, our teacher reacted in time and fused the remnant soul with the skeleton of a dog, turning it into a green-furred Akita. Oh, there was such a thing? Old Man Sun was surprised. Yes, Mr. Sunday. This dog is now at classmate Wang Ling's house. Back then, many of his classmates had said that they couldn't keep a dog at home, but classmate Wang's house just so happened to have plenty of space. In addition, we also think that student Wang Ling is too introverted, so having him help us raise the dogs will also help student Wang Ling deepen his interactions with the other students. Headmaster Chen said. He had said so much, but his meaning was clear. Actually, he was correcting some of his thoughts about Old Man Sun. What he had meant to say was that Wang Ling's ability to make friends actually didn't have much to do with his charisma, but definitely had something to do with the school's educational policies and policies. But obviously, Old Man Sun didn't think so. After listening to the whole story, he couldn't help beaming. Classmate Wang Ling is so introverted, but not only did he make friends, even his dog is willing to live in his house. It really isn't easy. Headmaster Chen, Grandpa's son, also, this dog's soul is a demon king, right? Principal Chen, that's right, Old Man Sun asked, since it's a demon king, did it become obedient after turning into a dog? Headmaster Chen, it was very obedient, and now that it's familiar with classmate Wang Ling, it listens to everything he says. When those shadow stream killers came to the school previously, classmate Loopy Toad even helped us kill one of them. That's it. Old Man Sun said, since this dog is being raised at classmate Wang Ling's house, it's enough to prove that his family's education is actually very good. It leads people to do good. Even such a ferocious demon king can be reformed to become so obedient. Don't you think there's a reason for this, Headmaster Chen? After saying this, Headmaster Chen was suddenly speechless. Old Man Sun's analysis was meticulous and almost impeccable. Headmaster Chen didn't even have the time to continue. They had been discussing whether they should visit Wang Ling's house again to see if there had been any signs of domestic violence, but after hearing Old Man Sun's words, Headmaster Chen instantly felt that there really wasn't much of a need to do so. This was a family that could even reform a demon king. How could they use violence against classmate Wang Ling? There was nothing wrong with this logic at all. Furthermore, if there really had been any domestic violence, given Loopy Toad's intelligence, it would have already mentioned it to the students around it. How could there be no response until now? Apart from what you've said, is there anything else related to classmate Wang Ling? Old Man Sun's interest in Wang Ling was growing. Headmaster Chen wiped at his sweat. He didn't want to continue talking about Wang Ling, so he changed the subject. About classmate Xia Ming. Oh, that classmate Xia. I'm not interested. Isn't it just the Ancient Divine Clan? There are also Ancient Divine Clan employees in my group. They're useless. Old Man Sun stroked the cane in his hand, his expression calm and unperturbed. Many people envied the innate advantage of the Ancient Divine Clan's spirit root, but if your cultivation talent wasn't good and your realm stagnated for a long time, it wouldn't matter even if you had the Ancient Divine Clan's advantage. After graduation, you would still have to work for someone else. As the chairman of a large corporation, Old Man Sun had more or less seen a few big scenes, so he naturally wouldn't be moved by a mere child from the Ancient Divine Clan. Furthermore, number 60 high school hadn't been a key city high school when it had enrolled Xia Ming back then, and had only been a key district high school. It couldn't be considered a particularly high-ranking school. In Old Man Sun's opinion, a child from the Ancient Divine Clan who got into number 60 high school wasn't particularly outstanding. Let's talk about classmate Wang Ling, Headmaster Chen. Old Man Sun's eyes lit up at the mention of Wang Ling again. Headmaster Chen could only try to explain Wang Ling's various shortcomings. Classmate Wang Ling's grades have always been in the middle. I suspect his dead fish eyes are distracting him. Oh, you mean his single eyelid. At first, I didn't like it very much, and I even wondered if I should pay for classmate Wang Ling to have a double eyelid. Later, I heard from my assistant that our Rongrong liked this style. Now, I'm used to it. This single eyelid looks lifeless, but it actually has a special kind of deterrent and gives people a sense of security. Old Man Sun analyzed. Headmaster Chen, also, as far as I know, classmate Wang Ling also likes to eat snacks. For example, crispy noodle snacks. Crispy noodle snacks. Old Man Sun nodded. Crispy noodle snacks are good. Eating snacks shows that he has a child's heart, and crispy noodle snacks can collect cards. Classmate Wang Ling is definitely collecting them. This collecting ability just proves that classmate Wang Ling has a pretty good sense of financial management, and can collect money. For a moment, Headmaster Chen was speechless. All the good things had been said by this Old Man Sun. Chapter 1102. He didn't know if it was because he and Wang Ling hit it off in his heart, or because his granddaughter Rongrong liked him, but as Old Man Sun listened to Headmaster Chen, he frantically analyzed the situation in his heart. At the same time, the more he listened, the more satisfied he became with Wang Ling. Although it wasn't to the point of marriage, Sunny Yuan at least felt that Wang Ling was someone she could date. Of course, Sunny Yuan himself couldn't guarantee anything when it came to feelings. He felt that even if Wang Ling and Lotus Sun couldn't really get together in the end, it would probably be great if they could still be friends. In contrast, he really wasn't interested in Xia Ming at all. In fact, it could be said that he was rather disgusted by him. What right did this person have to interfere when his granddaughter had decided to date him? Furthermore, he had especially challenged Wang Ling to a one-on-one fight, and instead of succeeding, he had been injured all over. How could such a person protect his granddaughter? Old man's son held the cane in his hand, his mind full of thoughts. Although he wasn't satisfied with Xia Ming, he couldn't show it directly, so Sunny Yuan took a deep breath and asked, "Where's classmate Xia Ming?" "He's still in the hospital." "Is it serious?" "It's all right. Our group will pay for the medical expenses," Sunny Yuan said. "How can I do that? It doesn't matter." "It's decided then." Old man's son was resolute, and Headmaster Chen was naturally helpless. The chairman's style of doing things had always been one to keep his word. Of course, apart from medical fees, old man's son also had his own plans. After Headmaster Chen asked about Xia Ming's situation, old man's son quickly made a call in his office to Huaguo Water Curtain Group's finance department. He didn't shy away from putting the phone on speaker in his office, and Headmaster Chen, who was on the side, could hear their conversation. "Is it little Zhang from the finance department?" "Yes, Chairman. I'm Zhang Jia. What can I do for you?" "Go to Peiyuan District City Hospital's trauma department right away and look for a patient called Xia Ming, room 207. "Yes, Chairman." "What do I want?" "Bring the legal staff and talk to him. Ask him how much money he wants to leave my granddaughter." Hearing this, Headmaster Chen took a deep breath. Wasn't this a cliché scene that would appear in all novels? It could be said that this wave of dialogue came quite unexpectedly, and Headmaster Chen was directly stunned. However, their conversation did not end there. "Chairman, let me be a little nosy. Is this classmate Xia Ming the one from yesterday's live stream, you also know?" I only heard about it," Sunny Yuan frowned. The impact of this matter was indeed very bad. Logically speaking, the people in the finance department should be too busy to pay attention to this kind of thing. In the absence of other work assignments, they had to work overtime to complete the accounting. Even the people in the finance department knew about it, which made old master's son a little unhappy. The impact of this matter was indeed beyond his imagination, mainly because it was not good for his granddaughter's reputation. After yesterday's live broadcast, he had already spent a large amount of money to smooth over the media, so that the media would disappear without a trace and not report too much about it. But now that he had cleared the channels with the mainstream media, it might not be so easy to stop those online marketing accounts that were trying to leech traffic. Where did the person who told you the news get it from? It was in the company's internal chat group. The impact of this matter actually isn't as big as you think, Chairman. Also, I took a look on Weibo before, and those videos have all been deleted and cleaned up, the finance department employee said. Cleaned up? Who did it? Wang Ming did it. Old master's son was blank. He definitely didn't have the ability to do it himself, and he hadn't spent money to hire someone to do it. Forget it, it was a good thing that it hadn't spread through the online channels. Before you go to the hospital later, go through the chat group and see who is so nosy. Tell them to come to the finance department to settle the bill and get the hell out. Yes, Chairman. Little Zhang shivered on the other end of the phone. Then about classmate Xia Ming's compensation, do as you see fit. Don't report it to me if it's less than 10 million, old master son said. Yes, I'll do it right away. The call was over. In fact, Sunny Yuan even felt that Xia Ming wasn't worth 10 million at all. But in order to ensure the success of the matter, an appropriate amount of money was necessary. Putting down the phone, old master's son stared at Headmaster Chen and smiled. I've embarrassed myself in front of you, Headmaster. You're too kind. Headmaster Chen was also shivering like the finance department staff on the other end. I want to ask Mr. Sun, is this how you deal with every person who confesses to classmate Lotus Sun? Giving money is the most direct way. Of course, it's mainly because this matter has blown up too much. I'm afraid that this classmate Xia won't accept it and will have other thoughts about Rongrong. Most people know when to back off and don't dare harbor any unrealistic thoughts. There's no need to give money to those kinds of people, Sunny Yuan said. Money was like a fleeting cloud to him, it wasn't a big deal at all. I heard that the body technique exchange meet in Peiyuan district is about to start. Classmate Wang Ling, will he be participating? Old Master Sun asked at that moment, changing the subject. The list of names hasn't been officially decided yet, Headmaster Chen replied. He wasn't trying to shirk responsibility, but that it really hadn't been decided yet. Headmaster Chen was still conflicted about the 10-member delegation, because the truth was that there were only 5 participants, and the remaining 5 were substitutes. As the main force, the transfer students who had just enrolled this semester were very strong. But they had just enrolled, after all, and Headmaster Chen felt that it wasn't particularly good to directly send them out as the main force, so the list of the main force hadn't been decided yet. Previously, he hadn't stopped the duel between Xia Ming and Wang Ling because he wanted to figure out which one of them would be better to send as the main force. In the end, after Old Master Sun spoke this time, Headmaster Chen immediately knew what to do. He continued, but although the list hasn't been confirmed yet, classmate Wang Ling has already been confirmed as the main force. He could be considered to have defeated classmate Xia Ming in yesterday's duel. Regardless of whether it's luck or strength, it's an undeniable fact. A wise decision. Hearing Headmaster Chen's words, Sun Yiyuan was immediately happy. He got up and shook hands with Headmaster Chen. Number 60 High is truly fortunate to have such a wise headmaster like you. As an old man, it was clear that Old Master Sun didn't know that the word, wise, had already been distorted in modern culture. Headmaster Chen was quite familiar with young people's culture, and when he heard this word for the first time, he thought it was an insult. Chapter 1103. That afternoon, at the friendly suggestion of Sun Yiyuan, Old Man Sun, Headmaster Chen swiftly compiled a list of names and put it up on number 60 High's school bulletin board. There were 5 people on the starting list: Fang Xing, Jiang Bai, Lotus Sun, Super Chen, and Wang Ling. 5 substitutes: Gu Xuanji, Lu Qingyi, Zhen Yuan, Hero Gua, Li Yuyue, and Xia Ming. Wang Ling knew most of these people, and they were practically all on his side. The only one he wasn't familiar with was Li Yuyue, who was in the same class as Fang Xing. She was the class monitor of Elite Class 2, and her grades were pretty good. As for Xia Ming, Wang Ling could be considered to have gotten to know him through a fight. If it had been before the duel, a lot of people might have questioned this list. Xia Ming's grades were so outstanding, so why should he be Wang Ling's substitute? But after the duel last night, no one said anything. Even if there were some who wanted to stand up for Xia Ming, they could only swallow their words. Their skills were inferior. Who could they blame? In short, there was no way this matter would end well. In the afternoon, Xia Ming saw the message in the class group chat at the hospital, and he was so angry that his bones, which had just gotten better, almost broke. His starting position had been snatched away, and Xia Ming's heart was gradually filled with dark emotions. Wang Ling. I'll remember you. Being forced to be a starter wasn't good news for Wang Ling, because it went against the Wang family's motto of keeping a low profile. Wang Ling had thought that after nearly half a year of torment, life in grade 1 might become a little more comfortable. He had never expected that not long after school started, all kinds of major events would happen one after another, attracting countless people's attention. Life was unpredictable. Fortunately, Father Wang had been concerned about the issue of his second child recently, and didn't have much free time to pay attention to Wang Ling, otherwise he would have to find an excuse to dock Wang Ling's pocket money again. In the evening, Wang Ming's remote projection appeared in Wang Ling's room once again. This was a method of using the Heavenly East satellite to project spirit power into a magic treasure, and turning a virtual image of a part of the body into a physical one. Wang Ming had already mastered it very well. Previously, he had only been able to turn his hands into a physical projection, but now he could turn most of his body into a physical one, just like when the real person came to Wang Ling's room. I've already blocked all the news that could be blocked, so do you want to thank me? After learning about the duel between Wang Ling and Xia Ming, Wang Ming immediately reacted by using his own technology to block a lot of videos and comments online. As long as a keyword was involved, it would be rejected with the excuse of, the internet is not smooth. Many people were just interested in some events for fun. After failing repeatedly, they would naturally give up. As it turned out, Wang Ming's guess was absolutely correct. Wang Ming had already applied for a patent on this technique, and felt that it could be used to solve some network management problems. Although the internet had implemented a real name system, there were always people who liked to find a sense of existence on the internet to vent their emotions. They thought that others couldn't see them through the screen, so they started to make up random comments and talk nonsense. A lot of online violence happens like this. Perhaps some people thought that scolding was nothing, but if tens of thousands of people thought the same, then it would be enough to form an army, and it would cause great damage to the hearts of many people. At birth, man is good by nature, but sometimes it must be said that it is difficult to guess man's evil intentions. Someone once said, when an avalanche comes, not a single snowflake is innocent. The hearts of people who had been subjected to all kinds of online violence for many years were already extremely fragile. As time went by, the violent words sent in the next second might be the straw that broke the camel's back. This also explained why some celebrities suffered from depression. They were clearly very young, but gave up on themselves when they were in the prime of their lives and had a grand future ahead of them. After experiencing cyber violence for a long time, the color of the world they saw gradually changed from colorful colors to grayish-black. In the end, this grayish-black became their final portrait in the world. Of course, Wang Ling didn't think that his heart was that fragile. Although he was still young, Father and Mother Wang had raised him to be a Buddhist, and he had long since seen through the world of mortals. He didn't care what other people scolded him or what they thought of him, but he also didn't want his affairs to be discussed in public. After all, he was just an ordinary kid who was still in school, not a public figure. It was a little unfair for him to be exposed to the public like this. So it had to be said that Wang Ming's handling of the matter had been very timely. Wang Ling watched as Wang Ming lay down on his bed very naturally and even took off his socks as he stretched like a cat in a comfortable nest. Wang Ling was silent for a moment, but didn't say anything. Today, he would make an exception. Dealing with online public opinion was as easy as lifting a finger for Wang Ming. Wang Ling knew that Wang Ming hadn't specifically asked him to look for him just to take credit. Looks like there's a result for Bai Yuquan, Wang Ling said telepathically as he stared at Wang Ming. Sure enough, you guessed it. Wang Ming smiled. You told me before that this guy has fated Dao and holds the memories of all kinds of worlds, so when we searched him, we found that his memories were particularly chaotic. Thus, Audiobook entrusted our research institute with a thorough screening of this guy's memories. To be honest, this result was a little unexpected. Wang Ling. We found another you in his memories, Wang Ming said solemnly as he sat up cross-legged. Back then, Wang Ming had already had a premonition. He still remembered the white-haired Wang Ling he had seen in his dream, who looked exactly like Wang Ling, even his dead fish eyes were deeply etched into wood. That was the person who had resurrected Devil Gut Fungus Lord and the current president of the Foreign Underworld Force Night Chief, Bai Zhe. Devil Gut Fungus Lord's whereabouts were currently unknown, but President Bai had made a series of moves after his resurrection. For example, Bai Yuquan was a character President Bai had pushed out after his resurrection. Although Bai Yuquan was President Bai's son in name, in Wang Ming's view, rather than a son, it was better to call him a pawn. Because from beginning to end, neither President Bai nor Devil Gut Fungus Lord had shown up. Although President Bai had already made a move, the truth was that Bai Yuquan had been the one to do all the public appearances. After their resurrection, it was as if these two people whom Wang Ling had personally dealt with before had become completely different people. They had changed their usual aggressiveness and were operating behind the scenes, and now, it could be said that the source had been found. The source was 100% that white-haired Wang Ling. But while this white-haired person looked like Wang Ling, Wang Ming had yet to thoroughly investigate their relationship. Chapter 1104. Wang Ming had no way of knowing who this white hair was and how he was related to Wang Ling, since he didn't have enough clues. But the truth was that Wang Ling already had a rough idea of what it was, but that was just his own speculation. Fate Dao was a special kind of great Dao, which he had learned from Bai Yuquan. Although it was very complicated, it wasn't as difficult as Wang Ling had imagined when it came to actually learning it. After mastering Fate Dao, Wang Ling had a completely new understanding of the three timelines, the past, the present and the future, as well as the world lines. He could mobilize power from any world line. But the fate Dao that Wang Ling mastered was in fact different from other people's. His world lines were all under his control, and the stories that happened in the other world lines could only be considered his clones. No matter what kind of personality the clones in the other world had or what happened to them, they couldn't possibly rebel against the original Wang Ling. This was the ability that Wang Ling had after mastering the ultimate meaning of Fate Dao. And Bai Yuquan had only scratched the surface. So Wang Ling had thought of a hypothesis about Whitehair's identity, assuming that this Whitehair was a clone that had left his original world before he had mastered Fate Dao. Everything actually made sense, but Wang Ling felt that this Whitehair wasn't as powerful as he had imagined. If he was really so powerful, why didn't he directly destroy the world? After coming to this world, he resurrected his mortal enemy and organized the Black Shadow Army. What was the point of doing all these fancy things? It was nothing more than an unknown grand plan hidden behind all this. Even though these were just Wang Ling's speculations at this stage, given that Wang Ming had provided him with a small number of clues to support them, there was a high possibility that they were right. The more Wang Ling thought about it, the more reasonable this explanation seemed. Because so far, he hadn't found any trace of Whitehair. There was nothing on this earth that Wang Ling couldn't find. But if this person had come from another Earth in another world line, it actually made sense that he couldn't find him. After all, every world line had a different story happening at every moment, and the laws and times of the world itself were also completely different. Their current world used spirit chi, so other worlds might also use battle chi, horse chi, immortal chi, and so on as a natural energy source in place of spirit chi. Wang Ling couldn't sleep that night. Xia Ming, who was lying in the hospital, couldn't sleep either. This was the standard temperament of a young man. Xia Ming had always been unconvinced by the outcome of his duel with Wang Ling, and felt that Wang Ling had defeated him purely by luck. But he really couldn't figure out what kind of body movement Wang Ling was using. Why was it that every punch he threw actually turned around and landed on his own body? Why was it that he was always the one who got hurt in the fight? He kept saying that he wouldn't let Wang Ling off, but in fact, he wasn't thinking of anything too malicious. He just wanted to find a suitable opportunity to fight Wang Ling again. Fair and just. Sparring in private. Not for Lotus Sun. It was all for the sake of fighting for a bit of pride. After lying in the hospital for a while, Xia Ming felt that he had calmed down a little. In the afternoon, Treasurer Zhang of Huaguo Water Curtain Group came to look for him as a representative, asking him to name a price to leave Lotus Sunday. Xia Ming thought that Huaguo Water Curtain Group might have misunderstood him, and he refused the treasurer's request on the spot. However, he also agreed that he wouldn't harass Lotus Sun in public again, and that everything from now on would be based on the principle of fair competition. While in the hospital, Xia Ming thought about it for a long time. The biggest reason why Lotus Sun looked down on him was probably because he wasn't outstanding enough. If he was outstanding enough, perhaps everything would become smoother. At that moment, Xia Ming tossed and turned on the hospital bed. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was to get better from his injuries as soon as possible so that he could resume his normal school life as soon as possible. Then, he would study hard, study Wang Ling's fighting style, and give him a good beating. But it was already 2 in the morning, and Xia Ming still didn't feel the slightest bit tired. He stared at the ceiling, deep in thought. At that moment, the door to the ward suddenly opened. Xia Ming thought that it was a nurse making rounds, so he closed his eyes slightly and ignored her. A very untimely male voice rang out. It was very low but magnetic. Xia Ming, descendant of the ancient divine clan, how are you? It clearly wasn't the female nurse's voice. Xia Ming thought it was someone else who had come to visit him, and his tone was clearly impatient. He turned his body halfway to the side, one hand already on the call bell, and he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the visitor. Big brother, it's already midnight, why don't you look at the time? Who would come to visit a patient in the middle of the night? This person was either a lunatic or a psychopath. I advise you to keep your little tricks to yourself, classmate Xia Ming. Otherwise, I can't guarantee the safety of the little nurse who comes here. When that voice rang out, Xia Ming saw a dark shadow as thin as a gossamer grip his hand. In a split second, he actually couldn't move. He felt pressure on his body, as if he was being bound by an indescribable force. It was like being held down by a ghost. He couldn't move, but his consciousness was extremely clear. He could sense that the shadow was talking to him. Who on earth are you? At that moment, Xia Ming already realized that the other party hadn't come with good intentions. It definitely wasn't here to visit him, but was clearly looking for him. I'm Nightmare. The shadow smiled. I'm everyone's nightmare. What do you mean? Xia Ming was puzzled. You don't need to know what it means, but I can tell you that I'm here to help you fulfill your wish. The mysterious shadow's voice came again. Do you know what your greatest failure was in the duel? Power. Xia Ming replied. That's right, you're indeed too weak. The shadow smiled. So, I can help you become stronger, classmate Xia Ming. What nonsense are you talking about? Xia Ming asked. The ancient divine clan has a unique physique, and your physique is actually one of a kind in the ancient divine clan. With your constitution, you can absorb the power of an entire underground heavenly vein. As long as you can absorb the power of that heavenly vein, defeating that classmate Wang will be a piece of cake. So, do you want to become stronger? Let's do a sex trade. Chapter 1105. What do you want me to do? At that moment, Xia Ming couldn't move at all. He was a little frightened. This mystical power was pressing down on him, tormenting his mind to the limit. It was a very torturous feeling, and it was as if this person's name was Nightmare. He was in a nightmare. It was very common for people to struggle in a nightmare, and Xia Ming's mood was even more so at that moment. He just wanted to escape this nightmare as soon as possible. After lying in the hospital for a day, it had taken him a lot of effort to calm down, but the appearance of this man called Nightmare threw his train of thought into disarray once again. The National High School Body Technique Exchange Conference is coming up, and the venue this time is the prestigious Nine Dragon Mountain. Student Xia, you only have one task, and that is to find an opportunity to climb to the top of Nine Dragon Mountain. After you reach the top, I'll give you other directions, said Nightmare. National? Isn't it held in our district? Xia Ming was astonished. Plans can't keep up with changes. Student Xia, you'll know the specifics tomorrow. I hope you won't stand me up. Of course, in order to prove that I have the ability to make you stronger, I'll give you a small gift first. After the man called Nightmare said that, Xia Ming instantly felt the pressure on his body loosen. After the man called King of Nightmares said that, Xia Ming felt the pressure that had been binding him instantly loosen. It was like the pleasure of suddenly being released after being imprisoned for a long time, and the comfortable feeling of having to pee for a long time before being released. Very quickly, Xia Ming woke up. At that moment, he was astonished to find that his body actually didn't hurt at all. The man called Nightmare had completed his task. He didn't have a true form, and was just a black shadow that came and went without a trace at an extremely fast speed. In Songhai City, Nightmare appeared in a completely abandoned factory. Through an iron door, he replied to the person inside, "The initial work has been completed. Well done." As expected of the Dark Network's first leader 300 years ago. The person inside the door said, "Without the ancient divine clan as the key, the main veins valve will never open. I already don't have the patience to keep waiting. I can only give it my all." "It's all thanks to Sir," Nightmare replied respectfully. He had been resurrected by this white-haired Sir inside the door. Although he didn't know what kind of methods this lord had used, he was completely convinced by the people in the sect. 300 years ago, he was the #1 ranker in the Dark Network. If it wasn't for his death, the ultimate killer king who had been captured wouldn't have become the #1 ranker. But now, Nightmare Lord did not expect that he would actually come back to life after sleeping for so long. It was like a dream. "Now, you have one last mission," Whitehair said. "Please speak, my lord. I want you to sneak into the residence of reincarnation and retrieve that person's broken bones." Residence of Reincarnation. Broken bones, the king of nightmares was stunned. The residence of reincarnation was a place that Nightmare was very familiar with. The so-called residence of reincarnation was also known as the prison of reincarnation. It was the largest underground prison in all of Huaxiao Nation, suppressing all kinds of evil spirits and vicious criminals that could not be completely eliminated. Speaking of the broken bones in the residence of reincarnation, the first person Nightmare thought of was the legendary figure who had founded the Dark Net. Xia Sanshao. People called him Dark Ancestor. "My lord, are you going to?" "That's right, I want to resurrect him. However, it is inconvenient for me to take action directly, so I let you go. This person is the key to the next part of the plan." The person inside the door wasn't the slightest bit worried that Nightmare would divulge the plan, and instead told Nightmare everything about the next part of the plan. Xia Sanxiao's real name is actually Xia. A long time ago, he was called Xia Sanshao. Xia Sanshao? Nightmare instantly caught a hint of information from the specific surname. Could it be, people called Dark Ancestor Xia Sanshao was in fact the founder of the ancient divine clan? Unfortunately, Xia Sanshao died too early. When it came to Dark Ancestor Xia Sanshao, Nightmare remembered it vividly. Back then, when this Dark Ancestor had fallen into the net of the law and been punished, the entire Dark Net had been shaken. No one had believed that this legendary founder of the Dark Net would actually die. Furthermore, he had died at the hands of someone called Zhua Butong. Back then, in order to capture Xia Sanshao, the International Alliance of Cultivators had gathered cultivators from all over the world and issued the first, Alliance-level Heavenly Dao bounty order. Under the command of the Alliance, 500,000 cultivators from all over the world had acted in unison to besiege Xia Sanshao. But in the end, when everyone found Xia Sanshao, a 4-man team of cultivators sent by Huaxiao Nation had taken his head, and the team leader at that time had been Zhua Butong. After this happened, the entire world was shaken. After that operation, Huaxiao Nation gained a huge international reputation. In the end, Dark Ancestor Xia Sanshao had also been thoroughly incinerated. His body had long since turned to ash, and the only thing that remained was a small piece of his skull that had been broken in half. This was the hardest part of the body, and Huaxiao Alliance had cremated it several times back then without success. In the end, it became a souvenir for the Huaxiao team when they killed Dark Ancestor Xia Sanshao, and was kept in the residence of reincarnation. Back then, Xia Sanshao wasn't killed by Zhua Budong's team, but died after he failed to absorb his main meridian. When Zhua Budong found him, he just picked up a loophole. Inside the door, White Hair laughed. "Picked up a loophole, so that's how it is?" This wasn't a secret among the higher-ups back then. Furthermore, it was people from the International Cultivation Alliance who suggested it. They went to great lengths to issue the first Alliance-level Heavenly Dao bounty order in order to hunt down the Dark Net's #1 wanted criminal. They mobilized hundreds of thousands of cultivators from all over the world, but in the end, Xia Sanshao died because of his own fault. What do you think public opinion will think about this matter if it gets out? Nightmare was silent. He had never thought that there would actually be such a story behind what happened back then. Back then, Xia Sanshao self-destructed because he couldn't absorb the power of his main meridian. Zhua Budong's team happened to be nearby, and picked up the pieces in passing. Furthermore, this descendant of Zhua Butong was also one of the organizers of the National High School Body Technique Exchange Conference this time. Who was it? Xia Sanxiao's real name was Xia Sanshao, and Zhua Budong's real name naturally wasn't Zhua Butong. Although Zhua Butong became famous in one battle back then and won the International Cultivation Alliance's first-class medal for meritorious service, he didn't want to soar too quickly to avoid making people jealous. He hurriedly applied to change his name so that the people who knew about this back then would bury this secret in their hearts. Even now, Zhua Budong's descendants don't know that their ancestor actually had such meritorious service back then. The person inside the door who knew everything laughed softly at that moment. Thus, he changed his name from Zhua to Zhua. His descendants now all have the surname Zhua. Currently, the most famous descendant is Odd Zhua. Chapter 1106. Killing Dark Ancestor Xia Sanshao was a big deal. In a short period of time, an ordinary cultivator had become a hero revered by the world, and it would be very difficult for ordinary people to withstand the various halos and sugar-coated bullets that followed. But in the end, Zhuo Budong chose to calm down. He was well aware of the principle that an innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth, and also understood the danger of a tall tree attracting the wind. Choosing to hide his achievements and fame wasn't just for his own safety and that of his descendants, but also for the future of the entire Zhuo family. If he accepted this lucky break setting and obtained a great glory that didn't belong to him for no reason, even if he could withstand the temptation of glory, it would be hard to guarantee that the rest of the Zhuo family's descendants wouldn't become arrogant in the future. It was easy for people to make mistakes when they were too arrogant. Many successful people were bound to experience all kinds of hardships and experiences before reaching the top. If they took a leap, they would be the ones who fell in the end. What Zhuo Budong feared was that he and his descendants would be affected by all kinds of halos and lose the will to strive forward. Thus, Zhuo Budong chose to hide. He abandoned everything and even changed his family name. All his friends and relatives who knew about this back then had their memories of this glory erased by Zhuo Budong and Huaxiu alliance during a secret trip. Even Zhuo Budong himself had been erased. When Zhuo Budong woke up again, he had changed his appearance and even changed his name to Zhuotong. That hero Zhuo Budong became a memory shared by Zhuotong and everyone else, and became a legendary hero of Huaxiu Nation. Every year, when Zhuotong visited the cemetery of martyrs on behalf of his organization, he would always feel a sense of déjà vu when he saw Zhuo Budong's face. Of course, this was all in the past, so in some sense, Whitehair felt that this Zhuo Budong was also an extraordinary person. Although his realm wasn't high, he had a long-term vision. But even Zhuo Budong himself couldn't have imagined that his skill at picking up scraps would be completely inherited by his descendants, especially by a person called Zhuo. But unlike Zhuo Budong, Zhuo was still striving to improve himself. This was because he had always been well aware that what he had obtained didn't truly belong to him. He needed to work harder and use his own efforts to prove that he was worthy of it all. After Whitehair finished explaining the basic situation, King of Nightmares was shocked. He had not completely digested the history of that year. "Don't worry, my lord. I'm aware of the situation. I'll immediately head to the residence of reincarnation." Of course, this information couldn't be obtained through normal channels, but Whitehair had his own unique means. He had originally calculated the time and planned to take advantage of Wang Wan's birth to come to this world, and then use the power of Shadow Dao to directly open the valve to the main vein of Nine Dragon Mountain. Unfortunately, Wang Ling's vigilance had exceeded his expectations. He didn't have much time left, and didn't have the time to continue tangling with Wang Ling. Now, he could only carry out his second plan as a last resort. Whether it was Nightmare, Xia Ming or that dark ancestor Xia Sanshao whom he was about to resurrect, in the end, they were just his tools. The prison of reincarnation was also called the Residence of Reincarnation. It was the largest underground prison in Huaxiu Nation's Jinghua City, and also the main prison for all serious criminals. Originally, the old devil, master of Immortal Mansion Qing Yu and evil sword god would have been escorted here, but General Bai, the head of the 10 generals, had made them stay behind and form a 3-man prison mahjong squad to atone for their crimes by working together to carry out missions. Because of this, the transfer of these 3 people to the prison had been suspended. The prisoners in the Residence of Reincarnation had committed truly heinous crimes. Actually, in comparison, whether it was the old devil, Qing Yu or evil sword god, none of them had committed such heinous crimes. Back then, the old devil had simply been blinded by love, and had broken into the National Palace in search of the Wheel of Time in an attempt to continue his former fate. He had caused a huge ruckus, and a lot of people had spread false rumors behind his back. But in reality, it wasn't as terrifying as the rumors made it out to be. This was a crime of illegal invasion. Master of Immortal Mansion Qing Yu's Immortal Mansion was an unauthorized dark force. He had obtained Immortal Shi Pai's magic array, and had planned to create trouble after he refined a peerless godly sword. But he had stolen Jinka. Before he could do anything, the entire organization had been wiped out. It was like a company that had just been set up and was ready to start operating, but the Industry and Commerce Bureau suddenly dropped by to take the boss away on the grounds that he was operating illegally. As for Evil Sword God, there was naturally no need to mention him. In order to surpass his Shifu, he had cultivated an evil art, which had led to a heart demon in his body. To put it bluntly, he was a psychopath with schizophrenia. As everyone knew, psychopaths weren't illegal, of course. There seemed to be a reasonable explanation for these three people's actions, but the fact was that they had still caused a very bad impact. It was only natural that they would be sentenced to 1,000 years to atone for their crimes. Furthermore, General Bai's condition was that this 1,000-year atonement could only be offset with merit points, and couldn't be waived according to the normal procedure. That was to say, if they didn't have a mission to carry out, they would have to wait for it, until their time was up. It looked very miserable, but at least in Songhai First Prison, Warden Liang treated the three of them pretty well, and would occasionally play mahjong with them. Compared with the truly vicious criminals in the Residence of Reincarnation, they weren't treated as well there. Even for Nightmare, this was his first time in the Residence of Reincarnation. After Whitehair resurrected him, just like Bai Yuquan, Nightmare had also received some power of Fate Dao, which made him even stronger than before he had died. Nightmare couldn't imagine how terrifying Dark Ancestor would be if he was resurrected. As he snuck in, the five of them discovered his tracks. Nightmare cultivated an extremely special technique. He cultivated his physical body into a virtual body, which was the highest realm of the nightmare art. The 8th floor of the underground prison actually wasn't a place where criminals were held. The Residence of Reincarnation divided criminals into 7 levels, and the lower the level, the higher the level of imprisonment. On the 8th floor was an exhibition hall. Inside the hall were the relics of some beyond S-class wanted criminals. When these criminals were discovered, they were almost always executed on the spot by Huaxiao's Immortal Arts Mobile Unit or the Allied Army's Peacekeeping Unit. The relics on display here were firstly to warn these criminals of how dangerous they were, and secondly to show how difficult it was for law enforcement officers to arrest criminals and crack down on crime. And Dark Ancestor Xia Sanxiao's skull, which Whitehair had mentioned before, was in this 8th zone. Apart from Xia Sanxiao's skull, Nightmare also found a lot of interesting things as he searched. Chapter 1107. As the Dark Ancestor, Xia Sanxiao had long been a world-shocking figure. To be able to be displayed together with the legendary Dark Ancestor's skull as a related relic, none of these criminals were to be trifled with. On the way, Nightmare saw many criminals who had extremely high bounties from the Heavenly Tao and were wanted globally by the Alliance. These people hadn't been caught before Nightmare died, but he didn't expect that they would become exhibits here in the span of a few hundred years. For example, the broken dark gold armor that Nightmare saw when he entered the door hadn't been completely cleaned of blood. Instead, it had long since dried up and was firmly attached to the armor. If Nightmare remembered correctly, the owner of this dark gold armor was Kaiser Maud, also known as the Golden Tank, a cultivator from the West. Back then, Kaiser's dark gold armor was the symbol of his identity. But what was truly solid wasn't his armor, but his body. Nightmare couldn't imagine that Kaiser Maud, who was known as the Golden Tank back then and had a sage body and the strongest body, was actually gone. From the marks on the armor, someone must have punched through Kaiser's abdomen, but who did it? It was hard to imagine that there was actually a man in this world who could break the Golden Tank's body. As he walked, Nightmare found the relic of a second old friend. It was a broken jade bead. If Nightmare's guess was right, this should be the inner core of the 6th-level Demon King, Kuei Wolf, who had fled to the human world from the gate between worlds and committed crimes everywhere. Nightmare didn't expect that even Kuei Wolf would be caught. Back then, because Kuei Wolf knew how to transform into a human, he did very well in the human world. He had even acted in several movies about the werewolf race and became a famous celebrity idol. He had even won the Golden Wolf Best Actor award several times. Logically speaking, as long as Kuei Wolf continued to disguise himself, no one should be able to guess his true identity, but why? Even Kuei Wolf had been discovered? Nightmare was puzzled and puzzled. He looked at the many relics displayed here. Most of them actually belonged to his old friends. For a moment, Nightmare actually felt the hypocrisy of the world. It wasn't easy to be a bad guy these days. It was too difficult for him. But in reality, when Nightmare thought about it carefully, he realized that he hadn't done too many evil things to climb to the top of the dark web. Whether it was Caesar or Kuei Lang, both of them were ranked in the dark web back then. Nightmare Lord himself wasn't even on the list yet. Then, how did he reach the top? Nightmare remembered that Kuei Wolf seemed to have found him first. At that time, his relationship with Kuei Wolf was as shallow as water, and they were merely drinking buddies. Chief Wolf came to him and told him that someone was willing to pay a high price for him to use nightmare art to send a person to a mental hospital. Nightmare remembered that he did not agree at first because he did not want to do anything illegal. After some investigation, he found out that the person Chief Wolf wanted him to deal with was actually a serial murderer who had been on the run for many years. Incubus thought about the high bounty and finally accepted the mission. But if there was one, there would be two. More and more people found the King of Nightmares through Kuei Lang's client. As for the King of Nightmares, more and more people were sent to the mental hospital. After a long time, Nightmare found out one day that he was wanted, and that he had appeared in the dark web's first position. He remembered that during the period when he reached the top, he kept having recurring nightmares. He was on the run from the Alliance and finally died at the hands of an old Taoist. And after he died, that murderer, who was the first to be sent to the mental hospital by him, was the Baldy who was now known as Ultimate King of Killers. Not only did he manage to escape from prison, but he also rose to the top of the dark web in one fell swoop. What Nightmare found out later was that Caesar was still alive at that time. There were also records of him fighting Ultimate King of Killers, who was the strongest in the dark web at that time. According to the records, the match between the two was a draw. Then, who was the one who had punched Caesar's abdomen? Such a large and thick hole had been punched through with a single punch. How terrifying was the other party's strength? This was one of the unsolved mysteries of Nightmare's exploration of the residence of reincarnation, who had punched Caesar. Finally, in the innermost part of the residence of reincarnation, in a completely sealed glass cabinet, Nightmare finally saw Dark Ancestor's skull, the symbol of endless evil. Even though it had already been burnt to the point where only this piece was left, the miraculous power that this half of the skull exuded made Nightmare feel an indescribable sense of power. He couldn't help but want to kneel down and worship it. Although he was surprised by the cause of Dark Ancestor's death, he was even more surprised by Dark Ancestor's crazy idea of absorbing the main vein back then. There were only over 1,000 heaven veins on Earth, and there was only one main vein. After absorbing the main vein, the tremendous energy of the other 1,000 underground spirit veins would be absorbed. Back then, Dark Ancestor had clearly underestimated this energy. This was the spiritual energy of an entire planet. If he absorbed it all into his body, if his body couldn't handle it, he would definitely suffer a backlash. Dark Ancestor, this junior has offended you. The shapeshifter's heart was filled with respect. It reached out its hand and silently snuck into the glass case to take the skull away. He was already a dead man. His life had been given to him for nothing. For Nightmare, he already had no way out. The future development of this world had nothing to do with him. Even if it was destroyed. Nightmare snuck in quietly until the next day, November 8th, Saturday morning. It was only then that the staff responsible for taking inventory of the items on display realized that Dark Ancestor's skull had disappeared. This incident caused a huge stir in the residence of reincarnation, and Huaxiao Alliance hurriedly called for an emergency meeting. Have we already ruled out internal personnel? Wisdom Saint President Qi was still in charge of the meeting. The disappearance of Dark Ancestor's skull was a serious matter. This was the #1 wanted criminal by the International Alliance of Cultivators back then. Even though he was already dead, the power of this skull still couldn't be underestimated. If it was used to commit evil deeds, the prison of reincarnation would lose all standing and reputation. Everyone has an alibi, and the possibility of using magic to commit the crime has been ruled out. There were no spirit power fluctuations detected at the scene. That is to say, no one has used magic in that area in the past 24 hours, General Yi said. That is to say, without the help of any magic, the only person who can easily sneak in without being discovered is. Speaking up to this point, President Xi glanced at the dark-skinned dark sacred ministering next to him. Dark Saint turned pale with fright. F***K. You can't say that I did it just because I'm dark. Chapter 1108. Indeed, after eliminating all possibilities of magic, only spontaneous abilities could accomplish such a difficult theft. There were in fact two kinds of spontaneous abilities. One evolved from the spirit root, which in addition to the 5 elements, actually had a small chance of awakening other special attributes, which were often accompanied by special abilities. For example, they could attract metal with magnetism, or they could control their own or other people's fats, or some people were born with the ability to become invisible. These were all spontaneous abilities brought about by special spirit roots. Although it was only a small probability, given the global population, there were in fact a lot of people with special spirit roots. In fact, Dark Saint was a cultivator with a special ability. His spirit root had a camouflage effect, which allowed him to remain completely invisible in the shadows. Thus, if he moved around in a dark and claustrophobic space, Dark Saint could move as if there was no one around. I think of someone who has the same ability as Dark Saint, and could even be said to be even more troublesome, President Xi said again. It was clear that at this critical juncture, he wasn't going to joke around with his colleague next to him anymore. Old Xi, you mean? Battle Saint Marshal Jiang thought of someone. Nightmare, President Xi said. This is the #1 person of the Dark Network whom you personally dealt with 300 years ago. He can't still be alive. Marshal Jiang instantly stood up with a solemn expression. I personally killed him 300 years ago. I only used telepathic finger to end his life the moment he revealed his true form. There's no way he's still alive. Old Jiang, sit down. President Xi said calmly, we also received news of Baijia's death before. But now, Baijia has reappeared, and even his son, Bai Yuquan, who died young, has miraculously reappeared and fallen into the net of the law. Thus, nothing in this world is absolute. There were too many ways of resurrection among the forbidden secret techniques to count. Although the chances of success are very low, it's not impossible. Crap. At that moment, Marshal Jiang's expression brightened. According to your theory, Old Qi, could it be that they stole Xia Sanxiao's skull for? If that's the case, then we have to prepare for the worst, President Qi sighed. Back then, Dark Ancestor Xia Sanxiao had been so powerful that no one could match him. It was precisely because of this that this Dark Ancestor was conceited, believing that he could absorb the entire Earth's underground spirit veins. However, the truth was that Xia Sanxiao had overestimated his own abilities. He was the strongest man who had died because of his own pride. He had not been killed by anyone, and no one could kill him. It was the same back then. Now, it was the same. If the other party had really stolen Xia Sanxiao's skull to revive him, in that case, there would soon be a reign of terror in the cultivation world. The cause of Xia Sanxiao's death was publicly acknowledged to be at the hands of the hero, Zhua Butong. If the prideful Xia Sanxiao were to learn of this after his resurrection, given Dark Ancestor's previous personality, he would probably immediately start a massacre. There's going to be a fierce battle. The 10 generals sat around the round table in the conference room. They narrowed their eyes and their emotions were complicated. Most importantly, they had yet to figure out the objective of the person behind the scenes. That morning, it was still a warm and sunny day, a day of world peace. Teacher Pen used the class group to hold an impromptu class meeting. Specifically, it had to do with the upgraded competition format of the body technique exchange meet this time. Teacher Pan, who was actually a great beauty, students, I've just received notice from the Alliance of 100 Schools that the body technique exchange meet this time has been upgraded from a district-level competition to a national competition. I hope everyone will work hard during this period of time. Students who are participating in the competition should work hard. Students who aren't participating should also cheer for those who are. At all members, Sports Committee member, Super Chin, how did it become a national competition? Why is there such a big jump? Ideology Hero Gua, my god, a national competition. How many schools will be participating? Will our school still be able to get a ranking? Because there are many cultivation schools holding similar exchange events at the same time, the Alliance of 10,000 Schools has decided to plan a large-scale event. Teacher Pan, who was actually a great beauty, everyone, don't be too pessimistic. Our school's overall fighting strength is actually pretty good. Because of the upgraded competition format, the competition will be delayed for 3 days according to the original schedule, which is to officially take place next Friday, November 14th, report to the designated location, 9 Dragon Mountain on Thursday night. Students participating in the competition will have to take an immortal boat. The competition will last for 8 days in total. 9 Dragon Mountain? Many people found this location a little familiar. Ideology Hirogwa, I remember this is 9 Dragon Mountain. Isn't there a big shot who died here? It's Dark Ancestor Xie Sanshao. Teacher Pan, who was actually a great beauty, student Gua knows a lot. Back then, this legendary number 1 figure of the Dark Network, Xie Sanshao, met his demise on 9 Dragon Mountain. Furthermore, it was our nation's hero Zhua Butong who personally led a team to kill him. Thus, 9 Dragon Mountain also has a very special meaning. This body technique exchange meet is being held here to commemorate these war heroes who realized their values and beliefs in battle. I hope all students will study hard. Class monitor, Lotus Sun, then, Teacher Pan, apart from the scale of the national competition, are there any other changes? Teacher Pan, who was actually a great beauty, originally, the district competition had 5 main participants and 5 substitutes. Now that the competition format has been upgraded, it's now a 10-person team. All 10 of them will be the main force. Wang Ling was stunned on the spot when he saw this message through the screen. 10 main force, even if he didn't do anything, with Lu Qingyi, Wang Zhen, Gu Xuanji, and that bunch around, what the hell could the other schools do? Teacher, I know that time is tight, but all the schools are preparing. This time, a total of 102 cultivation high schools will be heading to 9 Dragon Mountain from all over the country. Each school will send 10 people to form a team to directly fight a 100-team battle on 9 Dragon Mountain. The team with the highest number of points will be the winner. Teacher Pan said in the group, I know that time is tight for all of you, so next week, Headmaster Chen will personally give you supplementary lessons and conduct physical training as well as disseminate knowledge about spirit plants on 9 Dragon Mountain. 9 Dragon Mountain is lush with spirit plants, and for the 8-day team battle, everyone needs to be able to survive in the wild. It wouldn't be good if you accidentally ate spirit plants or fruits that you shouldn't. Looks like we're going to be busy. Hiro Gua sighed. The next moment, Teacher Pan said in the group, students participating in the competition, you don't have to do your homework first. Everyone. Chapter 1109. It was Monday, November 10th. The special training which Teacher Pan had previously announced officially began. Number 60 High School had set up a temporary special training class during the special training period, and all the participating students were in class together. Wang Ling, Lotus Sun, Xia Ming, they were all here. Xia Ming actually felt a little embarrassed. But Wang Ling didn't seem to care. Suddenly, he felt that compared with Wang Ling, he had truly lost completely, looking at Wang Ling's expressionless face, as usual, and the way he sat by the window like an old man who looked at everything with a carefree attitude, he felt aggrieved. How could this person be so calm? Was this person really just a high school student going through puberty? The special training this time was mainly focused on the following 3 aspects. 1. Understanding of spirit plants. Teacher Pan had already explained the specific reason very clearly in the group before. There were tens of thousands of spirit plants on 9 Dragon Mountain, and most of them were inedible. Some of them would be fine after eating them, but if you didn't digest them right away and immediately ate another one, there was a high chance that you would get food poisoning. Although Wang Ling didn't think there was a spirit plant that could poison him to death. 2. Understanding of the opponents. After the competition at the district level, the number of enemies that number 60 high school had to deal with instantly increased from less than 10 to a total of 101. Each cultivation high school had a different background and focus on teaching. Thus, it was very important to have a general understanding of these opponent schools. Know thyself, know thy enemy, and you will emerge victorious in every battle. Of course, because of the time limit, Headmaster Chen would only highlight some of the key schools. As for the other high schools that he felt were about the same level as number 60 high school in terms of combat strength, he would organize them into documents for the participating students to memorize. Thus, at the beginning of the day, Wang Ling saw thick stacks of documents on everyone's desks. With a single scan of the king's eye, Wang Ling instantly memorized all the information on the high schools. There was nothing special to pay attention to. It was fine as long as he was careful not to kill someone. If he really did kill someone by accident, although he could bring them back to life, the problem was that the psychological trauma would last a lifetime. Even if the memory was erased, there were still times when the mind would have a subconscious reaction. It was like why many people were afraid of heights. Maybe it was because they had accidentally fallen from a high place before, and their memories had disappeared. Apart from the above 2 points, there was also the third point, which was the special physical training. It was obviously unrealistic to want to quickly improve his physical skills in a few days. Thus, Wang Ling guessed that Headmaster Chen would probably share some technical knowledge with him. It was very common in body techniques to move 1,000 caddies with little effort. If you kept your mind on high alert during the 8-day team battle, you definitely wouldn't be able to last until the end and would eventually be eliminated. Dear students, this battle is of utmost importance. You will compete with the students from the other 101 cultivation colleges in the area designated by 9 Dragon Mountain to determine the final winner. In 8 days, this will be a protracted war, so we must first formulate a good strategy. On the podium, Headmaster Chen began to teach everyone. This time is different from the previous military training of the 6 schools. The military training of the 6 schools is a joint drill. Both the terrain and the environment have been artificially modified. It looks dangerous, but in fact, it has been treated for safety. But in this activity on 9 Dragon Mountain, accidents can happen at any time. Everyone will be fighting in the jungles of 9 Dragon Mountain, so you have to assign your own tasks in advance to maintain unity in the team. If someone gets lost and there are not enough people, there's a high chance that they will be swallowed up by students from other schools. Speaking up to this point, Headmaster Chen took out an iron chopstick. This is a piece of black iron. Then, he handed it to Gu Xuanji. Student Gu, try breaking the chopstick. Crack. With a crisp sound, the chopstick was broken in half. Gu Xuanji did as he was told. Breaking chopsticks was a standard experiment to illustrate the importance of team unity. Actually, a lot of people had already noticed it by now. Sure enough, Headmaster Chen took out another 10 chopsticks. Student Gu, try breaking them again. Crack. Gu Xuanji continued to break them effortlessly. Headmaster Chen took out the rest of the chopsticks. Student Gu, try again. Crack. Once again, Gu Xuanji showed no mercy. Everyone, Headmaster Chen, come, students, let's move on to the next topic, everyone, unity. This was a key phrase that Headmaster Chen mentioned at the beginning of the lesson. The 100-team battle was a team battle. Furthermore, it was a point system this time, and team points were calculated. All schools had to ensure that as many students as possible in their team survived to the end. Only in this way could they accumulate more points. This was because the way to accumulate points was the same, which Headmaster Chen would mention later. In a situation where everyone had the same way of obtaining points, if too many people in a school were eliminated, even if those few people were extremely strong individually, the final number of points they could obtain would not be comparable to the strength of many people. Unity was the essence of the 100-team battle this time. Headmaster Chen was still quite worried about number 60 high school's internal affairs. He was worried that something might go wrong between Xia Ming and Wang Ling. Wang Ling wasn't the kind of student who would take the initiative to pick a fight, but Xia Ming was more impulsive by comparison. Headmaster Chen had to think of a way to resolve this before the competition began. At the very least, he had to let Xia Ming and Wang Ling shake hands to show their friendship. Now, let me introduce you to the cultivation high schools that are relatively strong in the 100-team battle this time. If you run into students from these schools and you don't have full confidence in winning, please consider your school's honor and avoid fighting as much as possible. Make sure that you can survive. Headmaster Chen said. They're that strong? Although Hirogwa had long since learned from his uncle that there were indeed a lot of strong high school students among the schools participating in the competition this time, he hadn't expected that their number 60 high school would have to submit to those people when they went out. They didn't even have the qualifications to fight, and could only run away. First of all, number 1 Devil Subduing High School from Jinghua City. Headmaster Chen turned the magic ball in his hand, and an image was instantly projected in the air. It was a picture of number 1 Devil Subduing High School students, who were wearing black and white sports uniforms. The color of their uniforms was very gloomy, and it was obvious at first glance that they weren't people to be trifled with. It was the third quarter. Even if he had to hold back his tears, he had to finish writing the flag. Chapter 11:10. Number 1 Devil Subduing High School. While flipping through the handouts they had prepared in advance, they stared at Headmaster Chen as he talked about the history of number 1 Devil Subduing High. Number 1 Devil Subduing High had been established for less than 600 years, but it was a cultivation school invested in by the Devil Subduing sect, an orthodox light faction. Over the past 600 years, it had made important contributions to the nation's work of eliminating demons and protecting justice, as well as the cultivation of talents for the Immortal Arts Mobile Squad. As the sect leader of the Devil Subduing sect and the current headmaster of number 1 Devil Subduing High, Li Qingxi, who was nicknamed Devil Subduing Daoist, had long since made a name for himself. The specialty of number 1 Devil Subduing High was the study of control, and the students who studied there were naturally well versed in the Daoist arts and essences of all kinds of control spells. Thus, number 1 Devil Subduing High was extremely dangerous, and Headmaster Chen directly listed it as the number 1 school that needed to be strictly guarded against. Control-type spells were extremely difficult to deal with. Not only could they restrict the casting of spells, but they could also restrict the movement of the body. Soul sealing, petrification, weakening. Puppets. There were all sorts of control-type magic. If one wasn't able to properly deal with it, it would instead become the enemy's assistance. Although the main way to obtain points this time was through physical contact and using physical skills to hit the opponent to obtain points, it was not easy to do so. But in terms of spells, there were no restrictions in the 100-team battle. Apart from the 5 elemental spells that would cause large-scale destruction to the environment, all other spells could be used. What Headmaster Chen was most worried about was number 1 Devil Subduing High using puppet-type spells, forcing the students from the other schools to join their ranks and form a guard to protect them. In this way, they did not need to worry about the problem of guards at all. They only needed to focus on completing the mission and obtain as many points as possible. There were all kinds of puppet-type spells. If number 1 Devil Subduing High played it a little sinisterly, this battlefield would become number 1 Devil Subduing High's home court. One of the most troublesome puppet-type spells is the Virus Puppet spell. Headmaster Chen made an estimation of the control-type spells that number 1 Devil Subduing High might use in the 100-team battle this time. Virus Puppet technique? It's not a real virus, but a type of chain control spell. It was also a classic spell that could control one person when it was cast. After that, anyone or any living being that came into contact with this person would become his puppet. There are many levels to this spell, and you'll have to listen to whoever you touch. It's kind of like developing an offline system. Headmaster Chen said, the worst-case scenario is that some students from the schools might not be able to resist rescuing their teammates. They might act like the Calabash brothers saving their grandfather, and in the end, the entire army will be controlled. Everyone, Headmaster Chen, from my analysis, there's a high probability that the students from number 1 Devil Subduing High will be able to use this spell. To be honest, Headmaster Chen's behavior seemed like he was trying to suppress his score by going through the questions before the exam. However, it might not be accurate, but given the current situation, everyone could only believe in Headmaster Chen's estimation. Headmasters weren't particularly weak. Although Wang Ling had never seen Headmaster Chen display his battle prowess, for Headmaster Chen to be able to become the headmaster of a 1,000-year-old school like number 60 high, it would definitely be difficult for him to assume the mantle without a certain level of strength. The guard at the school gate, Old Manly, was a retired 7-star Special Forces soldier. He even had the strength of a nascent soul. Vice-Chancellor Chen's ability was definitely not weaker than Old Man Li's. But while half of the people present could only guess at Headmaster Chen's true realm, Wang Ling, Gu Xuanji and the others were well aware of it. Headmaster Chen indeed wasn't weak, he was an itinerant immortal. Compared with Gu Xuanji and the others, he still wasn't enough. But even if Headmaster Chen was just an itinerant immortal, Wang Ling didn't look down on him in the slightest. He was only 16 years old, and Headmaster Chen had seen a lot more than he did in terms of life experience. Furthermore, Headmaster Chen had been a headmaster for so many years, and had helped out with the district, city, and even national exam papers, so he understood the mentality of the other high schools too well. There was a circle of schools, and the headmasters of these schools naturally had their own circle as well. Therefore, this battle wasn't just a competition between the students, it was also a high-level psychological game between the principals of the various schools. Not only did they have to formulate battle strategies for their own school students, but they also had to guess the thoughts of the principals of the other schools, and guess the tactics that the principals of the other schools might use. But there were a total of 101 rival schools, and it was clearly unrealistic to analyze all of them, so Headmaster Chen could only pick out the key points. The rest would depend on the luck of the number 60 high team. Sometimes, luck was also a part of strength. In addition to guarding against number 1 Devil Subduing High, you also have to be wary of some school teams forming a temporary alliance in order to survive in the early to middle part of the 8 days. I'm more worried about no. 1 Devil Subduing High and Titan High teaming up, said Headmaster Chen. Titan High? Someone was puzzled. I know that. Super Chen raised his hand. Actually, my first choice for high school was Titan. Unfortunately, I didn't get in because I didn't have enough points. What kind of school is this? Don't tell me they're all. Hero Gua thought of a possibility. That's right, this Titan High lives up to its name. Both boys and girls are tanks. Everyone, Titan High has a ton system, and after entering the school, everyone cultivates the same technique, the Titan art. It's said that it can continuously compress a person's density. The students look normal, but some of them actually weigh over 1,000 gene or even 10,000 gene. Super Chen said, according to the Titan Arts classification, those weighing over 1,000 gene are trucks, 2,000 gene are tanks, 5,000 gene are battleships, and 10,000 gene and above are aircraft carriers. 10,000 gene. Is that the average Qiao Biluo? Hero Guo was shocked. Student Super Chen is absolutely right. At this moment, Headmaster Chen also voiced his worries. The students of Titan High are all heavyweights. The students participating in the battle this time are all in their first year. The students participating in the battle this time are all grade 1 students, so it's estimated that they're all truck-level students. Of course, there might also be tank-level students among them. These students from Titan High use techniques to compress their weight, thereby making their bodies extremely dense and almost indestructible. At the same time, they're very lethal and destructive. If they fight them head-on, it's nothing more than throwing an egg against a rock. If they join forces with number 1 Devil Subduing High and become meatball tanks for number 1 Devil Subduing High to eliminate the other schools, that would be very scary. Meatball tanks, this is also a type of puppet technique, which can be manipulated with special puppet threads. It can turn a human body into a destructive rolling ball. Among all the high schools present, no one is more suitable than Titan High. Chapter 11:11. It could only be said that Headmaster Chen was indeed Headmaster Chen. As a powerhouse who had seen the world, his analysis was as ferocious as a tiger's. Devil Subduing plus Titan teaming up. This was the worst-case scenario that Headmaster Chen could think of. If the students of these two schools teamed up, they would have meat shields, crowd control, and damage output. Then, this 100-team battle would lose its meaning. In the end, it would only become the main battlefield for these two schools. Therefore, in order to prevent this situation, which was the situation of the two schools forming an alliance, Headmaster Chen's strategy of giving priority to everyone was to start with the students of Titan High School. An important prerequisite for forming an alliance was that both students had to be on friendly terms. And according to Headmaster Chen's knowledge, there was no previous connection between the Titans and Devil Subduing. However, given Li Qingxi, the current headmaster of Devil Subduing High, he must have already thought of the optimal combination of Devil Subduing and Titan. Headmaster Chen thought that the other party was probably formulating a strategy to form a friendly alliance with Titan High School. Nothing was too deceitful on the battlefield. Perhaps disrupting the situation was somewhat shameless, but this was also a strategist's strategy. In order to prevent the two schools from forming an alliance, Headmaster Chen carefully formulated a plan. Headmaster Chen waved his sleeves and gave everyone a storage pouch. Everyone opened it and was shocked by the contents of the storage bag, because the storage bag given by Headmaster Chen was actually filled with snacks. And most of them were desserts. Wang Ling instantly understood what the headmaster meant. Students who practice the Titan arts need to gain weight, so their lunch in Titan High School is high-calorie food. Burgers, fried food, and all kinds of soft drinks and snacks. Among all these foods, desserts were their favorite. As long as he used the dessert plan, he would definitely be able to take down Titan High. Apart from that, there's also a simple support type spell in everyone's storage bags. This spell is a secret creation of mine, and I've spent almost all of my life's knowledge on it. Speaking up to this point, Headmaster Chen's eyes reddened, and he was almost moved by himself. Super Chen, Hirogua, Lotus Sun, Xia Ming, as well as Xia Ming's classmate Li Yuyue, were all pleasantly surprised. The support type spell that Headmaster Chen had developed by combining all the wisdom he had learned in his life, was actually passed on to them just like that? The few of them were filled with fear and trepidation. Everyone hurriedly took out the scrolls from their storage pouches and started reading. The name of this spell was not pretentious, it was called Dessert. The principle of casting spells was also very simple, and the method of making hand seals was also very simple. Effective spell: just make a hand seal towards the target you want to cast the spell. During the casting process, you need to make eye contact with the target. After being hit by the spell, the target will gradually have the desire to eat desserts and lose the will to fight. If he offered the dessert now, there was a high chance that he would be able to capture the other party's favorability. Effective time, determined by the caster's realm. The shortest duration is 2 minutes and the longest is 2 days. Spell taboos: do not use it on patients with diabetes or hyperglycemia. Dispel spell description: cast dessert on the target again. Everyone in the special training class could not help but fall into deep thought as they stared at the unpretentious instruction manual. This was the legendary Headmaster Chen's lifelong learning? Wang Ling raised his eyebrows. He did not look down on this spell. Instead, he felt that Headmaster Chen was a talent. Although the principle of casting dessert was simple, it was the essence of a heavenly Dao spell called the Great Taste spell that Wang Ling was well versed in. This Great Taste technique was a technique that could control one's mental thoughts and stimulate one's appetite and taste buds. It was richer than dessert, and could be said to be a super upgraded version of Headmaster Chen's dessert. However, Headmaster Chen had been able to design a dessert with the same logic as a heavenly Dao spell with his own strength. Wang Ling couldn't help but admire Headmaster Chen a little. Whether Headmaster Chen had hit the nail on the head by a fluke or had really carefully considered the principle of dessert, if it could hit the nail on the head, then it was a powerful spell. But then again, the Great Taste spell was actually one of the spells that Wang Ling had listed as useless. Wang Ling felt that this spell was basically useless, because most cultivators could learn to control their appetites after reaching the cultivation realm. Even the students from Titan Middle School, who gobbled down a high-calorie diet every day, ate so much not because their appetites were affected, but purely because they needed it to cultivate the Titan arts. It could only be said that in order to sow discord between Titan Middle School and No. 1 Devil Subduing High School, Headmaster Chen had really gone all out this time. Putting aside this self-created, dessert, spell, just the snacks and desserts in the storage bag were a huge expense. Ordinary desserts and snacks definitely wouldn't make a good impression, so what Headmaster Chen had prepared in the storage bag were all high-end desserts that were hard to buy on the market. After formulating his first plan, Headmaster Chen couldn't help laughing in his heart. Oldly, let's see how you fight me. After formulating his first plan to sow discord, Headmaster Chen began to introduce the students of the next school, South Sea Sky High. This was a high school that also had students in blue uniforms. The difference between them and number 60 High was that number 60 High's uniform was dark blue with a touch of navy blue. South Sea Sky High's school uniform was azure blue, mixed with a few patches of white. In fact, it was sometimes possible to tell what a cultivation school's main learning specialty was from the design of its uniform. South Sea Sky High's specialty is the study of nature, Headmaster Chen said. Headmaster Chen said, the students of South Sea Sky High School have the ability to converse with all living things. They are very powerful perception-type students. There are many spirit plants and spirit beasts on Nine Dragon Mountain. If they use their abilities properly in this kind of terrain, they will have an overwhelming advantage. Furthermore, precisely because they are perception-type students, this group of students from South Sea Sky High is also extremely strong in anti-tracking. They can easily find your location, but it's very likely that you won't be able to find their traces. Then what should we do? Students, there's no need to panic. I've already thought of a way to deal with this. With that, Headmaster Chen waved his hand again and handed out a second brocade bag to everyone. In order to deal with the students from South Sea Sky High, we have to learn how to deal with the problem. This brocade bag contains a second auxiliary spell that I've designed. This spell is my own secret creation, and I've spent almost all of my life learning. Everyone? Had they heard this sentence somewhere before? Chapter 11-12. Let me introduce to all the students the spell contained in this brocade pouch. I named it Blacklist, Headmaster Chen said. Everyone, as the name implies, this spell can block others from tracking you. Furthermore, it's very simple to cast, you just need to cast it on yourself. During this time, you just need to ask the other party's name. As long as the other party dares to agree, the effect of Blacklist will automatically activate. For the next 10 hours, these perception-type cultivators won't be able to sense your presence. Headmaster Chen said, the key to casting this spell is to catch people off guard. When you arrive at your destination, you just need to meet the students from South Sea Sky High first, cast Blacklist on yourself, and take the initiative to ask for their names. Since it's the first time you've met them, I'm sure they won't refuse to tell you. Wang Ling was stunned. There was actually this kind of operation. To put it simply, Blacklist was a passively triggered spell that would only be triggered under certain circumstances. This setting was a little like the Golden-Horned King and the Silver-Horned King's purple gold gourd in Journey to the West, which had the feeling of, I'll call you, do you dare answer? As long as they agreed. Blacklist immediately, of course, what frightened Wang Ling the most wasn't Blacklist itself. It was that Headmaster Chen's Blacklist actually confirmed one of Wang Ling's Heavenly Dao spells. Looking at the spell structure of Blacklist, Wang Ling actually sensed a hint of the Great Shielding spell in it. Although the effect of Blacklist itself was worlds apart from his Great Shielding spell, the basic logic was the same. If the first time was a coincidence, then what was the second time? Wang Ling was increasingly curious about this Headmaster Chen. In fact, whether it was dessert or Blacklist, these were just the tip of the iceberg when it came to Headmaster Chen's vast array of original support spells. One of the biggest characteristics of Headmaster Chen's original support spells was that they were simple, but impractical. However, they could erupt with unexpected effects in certain situations. This was the essence of the Chen family support spells. Headmaster, how did you come up with these support spells? Lotus Sun took the initiative to ask the question that everyone wanted to know. In reality, everyone present knew very little about Headmaster Chen. Headmaster Chen gladly accepted the question. This was a rare opportunity for the students to understand themselves. Furthermore, the 10 children sitting here were the 10 relatively outstanding student representatives of number 60 high school. Headmaster Chen felt that it was fine for them to share their stories and experiences in front of these student representatives. Usually, no one would listen to him even if he wanted to say a few more words. Do you still remember number 59 high school's headmaster Jean? He was my fellow disciple in 7 Stars sect back then. Headmaster Chen smiled. Yes. The crowd nodded. Speaking of which, these support-type spells of mine are the paths that I took by chance back then. Headmaster Chen slowly said, the 7 Stars sect's graduation design has always been very strict. Our main major in university is actually auxiliary studies. Back then, our graduation requirement was to design an original support-type spell. Old Jean and I took different routes. In comparison, Old Jin's support spells have more beneficial effects. For example, converging one's heart, or gathering one's strength. These are all spells that can condense strength in a short period of time, improve mental power, and make cultivators stronger and more focused. Old Jin's graduation design was very outstanding at the time. He also used a new concept in the way he cast the spell, which could greatly reduce the time it took to form a hand seal, which resulted in an instantaneous beneficial effect that lasted for a very long time. Unfortunately, Old Jin's outstanding graduation design was rejected in the first round. Why? Asked Super Chen. It's not that Old Jin's design wasn't outstanding enough, but that there were too many original support-type spells like this. In terms of casting effects, there was almost no difference except for the strength and duration of the spell. My university tutor at that time rejected Old Jin's opinion in the first round, but I was inspired by it. Headmaster Chen put his hands behind his back and said proudly, now, a dessert that everyone is looking at is actually the work that I designed when I graduated from university. It sounds a little nonsensical, but I received a very high graduation evaluation. I remember that the old headmaster of 7 Stars sect's evaluation back then was that although dessert was simple, it had a profound Tao, and had a good social value in promoting social relations and creating a harmonious environment. Thus, it was approved. Everyone, actually, this wasn't without reason. A lot of people like to eat desserts because sweetness secreted dopamine in the brain, and dopamine could make people happy. This was the main reason why some people in a bad mood like to eat desserts. As for promoting social harmony, Wang Ling thought that it was probably because the dessert spell had the effect of increasing people's favorability. However, this favorability was only temporary. It was a little like the legendary suspension bridge effect, which was an illusion created by a spell. But what surprised Wang Ling himself was, as an itinerant immortal, Headmaster Chen had actually studied support type at university, with this kind of realm, but devoting himself to studying support type spells was a little like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. But Wang Ling had to admit that Headmaster Chen was indeed a very talented person. The truth was that until now, the students of No. 60 high school still hadn't realized that Headmaster Chen's Chen family support type spell had once caused a reign of terror in the martial arts world. In the current circle of headmasters, almost all the cultivation school headmasters who knew Headmaster Chen and had fought him before had tasted the fear of the Chen family support type spell. While number 60 high school was fiercely discussing tactics to deal with the other schools, the other cultivation schools naturally weren't idle either. Number 1 Devil Subduing High School, Titan High School, South Sea Sky High School. Almost at the same time, the headmasters of each school personally came forward to guide the participating students through a pre-match tactical discussion. Contrary to the expectations of the students of the 3 high schools, the first school these headmasters discussed wasn't the high-ranking Key City High School that they had imagined, or those famous high schools with strong students as a whole. Unexpectedly, the first school they discussed was number 60 High School. Chapter 11-13. Songhai City's local high schools might be more familiar with number 60 High's news. But number 1 Devil Subduing High, Titan High, and South Sea Sky High were all out of town. The headmasters of those schools might have been paying attention to number 60 High's recent situation, but the students were more concerned about their nearest opponent. In other words, from the very beginning, these students had never regarded the students of number 60 high as an opponent. Even if there was a young Miss of Huagua water curtain group like Lotus Sun, the problem was that this was a team battle. No matter how strong one person was, it would be very difficult for them to be the savior. This was just like the League of Legends S9 World Finals, where a sexy little fatty named Azeo was once again getting further and further away from the world championship of his dreams. Once his teammates were screwed up, even a god wouldn't be able to move them. This time, the teacher leading number 60 high is their headmaster, a man called Chen Tianxiang. Number 1 Devil Subduing High's headmaster, Li Qingxi, stood on the dais and started teaching the students of the special training class. He didn't mention the students of number 60 high, and instead directly started with headmaster Chen. Li Qingxi hadn't thought much of number 60 high at first, but he also didn't underestimate them. However, when he heard that headmaster Chen was personally leading the team, he instantly panicked a little. After all, that man had tortured him badly back then. I know that all of you may think of the people from number 60 high as rotten fish and shrimps, or even look down on them. But what I want to tell you is that it's not like number 60 high, a 1,000-year-old school hasn't produced any talents. Headmaster Li said with a solemn expression, for example, that Director Zhua, who has been making a name for himself recently, the heroic figure who single-handedly defeated the Demon King Sky-Swallowing Toad 6 years ago. In addition, there are a lot of students who have transferred to number 60 high this semester. Don't tell me all of you haven't figured it out. Headmaster, are you exaggerating? Someone laughed. That Director Zhua graduated a long time ago. I have a childhood friend from number 60 high. He said that their school isn't good, and that their overall fighting strength is definitely inferior to ours. Don't ever underestimate any of your opponents. Underestimating them will only make things difficult for you. Li Qingxi stared at this student, a little disgusted with his belittling of the weak. Number 60 high's headmaster Chen Tianxiang was 7 stars sex gold medal support student back then. He was a Cultivation World Support Degree PhD tutor, and the support spells he designed have won numerous international awards as well as numerous patents. My hands almost went limp with the prize money. Headmaster Li said, moreover, the biggest characteristic of his support spells is that he learns them very quickly and casts them easily. As long as it was used under certain circumstances, it would have an unexpected effect. When you see the students from number 60 high this time, you must be careful. We can't fight them head-on. Then wouldn't it be better to use the puppet technique to control all of them? A student said. No. Headmaster Li shook his head. The essence of support is to wait for the right opportunity. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. If the enemy moves, I'll move first. If you act rashly, you'll only be at a disadvantage. Moreover, most support-type spells had traps. That's why I suggest that we use passive control spells this time. For example, Virus Puppets. Virus Puppet. Everyone instantly understood. This was indeed an effective way to counter support, although it was a little too sinister to use this method in the National League. Virus puppets developed very quickly. As long as the other party was touched, the other party would instantly become a tool for a period of time. They could only obey orders obediently, otherwise they would have endless headaches. Of course, apart from using the virus puppet spell, I suggest that we form an alliance with other schools. At the very least, we need to ensure that our demon-subduing members don't suffer too many losses in the early to middle 8 days. Headmaster Li Qingxi made all sorts of plans in his heart. Given what that headmaster Chen Tianxiang knows of me, he definitely thinks that I'll win over acquaintances. Then, this time, we'll do the exact opposite. Headmaster, you mean, let's form an alliance with Titan High School. Although we don't have a deep understanding of Titan High School at the moment, I've already calculated that these students from Titan High School are very suitable for our virus puppet and meatball tank battle tactics this time. So there was a meatball tank. Hearing this, everyone's eyes couldn't help but light up. Using these 2 sets of spells would indeed make a huge difference in the course of a team battle. Moreover, if they could develop it to the later stages, they could practically do whatever they wanted. With full control, they could attack and retreat at will. Not only could the meatball tank help them retreat when they encountered danger, it could also be used as the attacking party to take the initiative to form a team. It could only be said that as expected of their headmaster Li, he could actually think of such tactical thinking. The basic tactics are what I've mentioned above. Headmaster Li Qingxi finished explaining, but for some reason, he still vaguely felt a little flustered. Before he became the headmaster of demon-subduing high school, Li Qingxi clearly remembered that he'd had many opportunities to fight Chen Tianxiang. Unfortunately, every time they fought, he'd always suffered a crushing defeat. The strange thing about this man was that no matter what kind of destructive spell he used, the other party could always use his Chen family support spell to easily neutralize it with little effort. Thus, even after coming up with these tactical ideas, Li Qingxi still felt very uneasy. He had been abused by Headmaster Chen so many times that it was almost as if he was suffering from psychological trauma. This person's support spell was unfathomable, and his tactical thinking was as deep as the ocean. Li Qingxi believed that among so many opponents, Chen Tianxiang was the most difficult to deal with. But it was different this time. He didn't have to do it himself, but it was a competition between the students. As the headmaster of a school, the game of tactical thinking was also the highlight of this 100-team battle. Their number 1 demon-subduing high school was famous. If they lost to number 60 high school this time, number 60 high school might instead gain momentum. In the past, number 60 high school might not have been so scary. But after Chen Tianxiang took over as the headmaster of number 60 high school, Li Qingxi had almost instantly placed number 60 high school on his list of priorities. He was all too aware of this man's methods, he even knew them better than his own bones. He hated Chen Tianxiang to the bone, and every day and every night, he thought about how to deal with him. Headmaster Li scanned the list of participants in the 100-team battle in his hand, and then scanned the names of the number 60 high school participants. Except for Lotus Sun, he actually didn't recognize a single one of the other students. Many of these students were transfer students who had almost no achievements from cultivation competitions. At most, they had only won a few district awards. Although Li Qingxi didn't think there was anything to fear, he still vaguely felt a little uneasy. Chapter 11-14. Huaxiao Alliance had been a little busy recently. After Dark Ancestor's skull was stolen, they had secretly dispatched tens of thousands of Immortal Arts mobile teams to patrol the country in an attempt to find any clues about Nightmare. Cultivation police stations everywhere were on high alert. If the matter of Dark Ancestor's skull being lost was exposed, Huaxiao Alliance would lose all face. Apart from that, the battle on 9 Dragon Mountain was also officially under Huaxiao Alliance's command. This battle was in fact an anniversary celebration of the founding of the nation, and no one had expected Dark Ancestor's skull to be lost at this time. And most crucially, Xia Sanshao had ultimately died on 9 Dragon Mountain back then. President Qi had been unable to eat or sleep in peace these last few days. He was a little worried that what had happened back then would happen again. It was still Monday, November 10th. In the afternoon, President Qi was waiting for an important guest in a conference room on the top floor of Huaxiao Alliance. A shabbily dressed old man was led into the conference room by a dignified and beautiful secretary. The old man had a head full of white hair and a face full of beard stubble. He wore a sackcloth of the marketplace. If someone were to see him, they would not be able to help but silently criticize him, saying that he was an old man from the countryside. But President Qi's attitude toward this person was unusually respectful. He was one of the Grand 10 generals of Huaxiao Nation. He was the supreme wisdom saint. Now that he saw the old man arrive, he couldn't help stepping forward and gripping the old man's hands tightly. Shizuan. That was right, this old man was none other than the teacher who had guided President Qi step by step on the path of cultivation back then. At the same time, the old man also had another identity, Chief Guardian of the Heavenly Veins of Huaxiao Nation. This was a hidden position that outsiders didn't know about. All the Heavenly Veins in Huaxiao Nation had an itinerant immortal guarding them day and night to prevent terrorists from thinking about stealing the resources of the underground spirit veins. Huaxiao's current Chief Guardian of the Heavenly Veins of Huaxiao Nation was this ordinary-looking old man in ragged clothes, Old Sir Huang, Huang Feng. Protecting the heavenly veins was an extremely arduous task. As the chief protector, old Mr. Huang naturally shouldered this heavy responsibility. The vein of the heavens was located in a rural area with high mountains and dangerous rivers. Living in such a place, one would become like a beggar after a few days, no matter how well dressed one was. This was a tough job, but old Mr. Huang had been holding on to it for thousands of years. Underground spirit veins, especially heaven veins, were extremely precious. They were non-renewable resources. If it was stolen, it would affect Huaxiao Nation's foundation. The vein of the heavens was the destiny of a great country. As the chief protector, old Mr. Huang knew better than anyone else how important it was. "Teacher, do you want to take a break first? You asked me to come here in a hurry because you told me to take a shower first, right?" Old Mr. Huang was obviously a casual person. He did not care about his tattered clothes at all. He casually pulled a chair and sat down. Facing his former teacher, President Qi didn't know what to say for a moment. Old Mr. Huang smiled. Dark Ancestor's skull was stolen. "Is that what you want to talk about?" "Teacher, how do you know about this?" President Qi had an astonished expression on his face. This matter was highly confidential. The number of Immortal Arts mobile squads has increased. In addition, there's going to be a 100-team battle for those kids on Nine Dragon Mountain. I was wondering if this had anything to do with Nine Dragon Mountain. Speaking of Nine Dragon Mountain, the first thing I thought of was naturally that all-powerful legend Dark Ancestor. Old Mr. Huang said, "With so many Immortal Art mobile squadrons moving out at the same time, I'm guessing they're searching for something. However, I wasn't sure what it was until I saw you. Teacher, this student admires you for having such foresight." President Qi bowed. Of course, he had invited old Mr. Huang here to find out the truth. Old Mr. Huang's spirit root was a special legendary spirit root, which had a mystical psychic quality. The moment old Mr. Huang saw President Qi, he immediately saw the phantom image of a bone in his mind. He immediately knew that Dark Ancestor's skull had been lost. If it wasn't for the situation, this disciple would never have dared disturb teacher. "All right, enough with the pleasantries." Old Mr. Huang waved his hand. "Come, tell me everything that happened in detail." President Qi nodded. Using mental transmission, he instantly transmitted the whole story to old Mr. Huang's mind. Old Mr. Huang's eyes lit up. "Nightmare, this guy is still alive? There's actually a weirdo who can bring the dead back to life. Teacher, can you find Nightmare's whereabouts?" "I'll try." Old Mr. Huang took a deep breath. He focused his mental energy, and the scene in his mind instantly turned into a cloud of smoke. A few minutes later, old Mr. Huang opened his eyes, his forehead drenched in sweat, and he couldn't help the astonishment in his eyes. "Strange, what's wrong, teacher?" "What's wrong?" "Nothing like this has ever happened in my psychic dream," old Mr. Huang said. Old Mr. Huang said, "In the past, when I wanted to communicate with the spirit, even if I couldn't see the object clearly, I could still make a rough outline of the object. Finally, I could combine it with the actual situation and analyze it. Usually, I could find some clues. But this time, when I was psychic, I saw that there was fog in my spirit sea, and I couldn't even see the outline. This. President Qi, what do you think, teacher? The strength of this person behind the scenes can't be underestimated. I'm afraid he's stronger than me. If this person intends to resurrect Dark Ancestor, I'm afraid that Dark Ancestor is nothing more than a pawn. The other party probably wants to use Dark Ancestor's power to achieve something. But what on earth is it? Old Mr. Huang murmured to himself. However, his words had hit the nail on the head. In just a few seconds, this pair of master and disciple actually thought of the same thing. Their faces were alarmed, and their hair stood on end almost instantly. "The main vein valve," they said in unison. The other party had definitely resurrected Dark Ancestor for the main vein valve on Nine Dragon Mountain. The person behind the scenes wanted to imitate Dark Ancestor back then, and used the natural resonance between the ancient divine clan and the underground spirit veins to absorb all the underground spirit veins on Earth from the main vein. At that time, Earth's spirit chi would dry up, and it would be beyond redemption. This is a serious matter. We have to strangle Dark Ancestor in the cradle as soon as possible. Old Mr. Huang's expression was solemn. Since no one in the world is Dark Ancestor's match, we have to gather the strength of all the experts to suppress him. We have to take down Dark Ancestor. This person is too deranged. Once he revives, he'll definitely start a massacre. Chapter 11:15. The severity of the situation had reached a point where there was no room for delay. If the underground spirit vein was drained dry, the only consequence would be the depletion of Earth's spirit chi. Human cultivators wouldn't be completely destroyed. But what was truly frightening was the conspiracy behind the absorption of this massive spirit vein. Back then, Dark Ancestor C.S. Sanshao had overestimated his capacity, and in the end, because he couldn't withstand the enormous energy, he suffered a backlash from the spirit vein and died on the spot. So, if the person behind the scenes who had the ability to resurrect Dark Ancestor tried to use the power of the ancient divine clan to pry open the main vein valve and restart the absorption plan Dark Ancestor had thought of back then, what on earth would happen? Teacher, is there really someone in this world who can absorb all the underground spirit veins on Earth? President Xi had always been doubtful. Back then, Dark Ancestor had already become a sage with a terrifying physique that was practically indestructible. He was the first and founder of the Dark Network, and was also known as the most evil man on Earth back then. If even Dark Ancestor's body couldn't withstand the pressure of the energy backlash, who else could do it? Huang Feng's expression was also gloomy as he pondered the same question. As the chief guardian of the heavenly vein, Old Man Huang had been guarding the main vein valve on Nine Dragon Mountain for hundreds and thousands of years. His understanding of the underground spirit vein was even better than that of some people from the ancient divine clan. What is certain now is that Dark Ancestor is nothing more than a pawn in this matter. The true plot of the person behind the scenes is to open the main vein valve and suck the underground spirit vein dry. If there really is a way to absorb the underground spirit vein and completely store it in the body, I'm afraid that this person's strength will far exceed that of anyone on Earth, and he will reach the realm above true immortal. Venerated Immortal? Rumor has it that the venerated immortal realm is the Tao realm, which is also called Tao Ancestor. But we don't know if there is a higher realm after Tao Ancestor. There is a higher realm. President Xi was lost in thought. President Xi believed this, but he didn't dare think too much about it. As mentioned earlier in the Fundamentals of Cultivation Truth, cultivation was an endless process. It was just like a person's experience bar. The more they grew and climbed, the more experience they needed to fill it up. And whether or not they could break through a bottleneck depended on whether or not their experience bar could overflow after it was filled up. As a cultivator, the key to a cultivator's cultivation lay in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Therefore, in theory, if all the spiritual energy of the entire earth was sucked dry and stored in one's body, it was indeed possible to break through powerful heights that ordinary people could not reach in a short period of time. However, such a plan required the support of a powerful physical body. In theory, the physical sanctification was the highest level that could be achieved with the physical body. Back then, the main reason for Dark Ancestor's defeat was because he thought he was indestructible and was too arrogant. In that case, could the mastermind really do it? The white-haired boy pushed open the tightly shut door of the abandoned factory and walked out. Your Excellency. Nightmare bowed and presented Dark Ancestor's skull with both hands. The white-haired man formed a seal with one hand and raised his sword fingers. He guided the skulls up into the sky and then back down. Nightmare already knew that this was the resurrection spell specially created by this lord, and it was the first time he had seen such a resurrection spell in his life. It wasn't that he hadn't read up on how to manipulate and resurrect dead souls, but there was always a huge price to pay in exchange for a life. But Nightmare realized that the resurrection spell used by the white-haired man was completely different from the forbidden spells he knew of. There was no darkness in this resurrection spell at all. On the contrary, Nightmare could sense boundless vitality and vitality as Whitehair cast the spell. The vitality of the revival of all living things and the radiance of souls made the shapeshifter involuntarily feel relaxed and happy. Even the soul of a bystander felt a sense of comfort under the effect of the spell's radiation. It was as if the spring breeze and rain were silently moisturizing everything. It could only be said that, as expected of Lord Whitehair, Nightmare watched from the side, unable to suppress his admiration for the white-haired man. After making sure that the skull was buried in the ground, the white-haired man injected spirit chi into it. With a wave of his hand, an emerald green sprout immediately appeared on the ground. The flower of revival will bloom tomorrow. Stand guard here and wake me up when the flower blooms. The spell didn't seem to be particularly exhausting, but it actually made Whitehair feel a sense of fatigue after using it. So the side effect of using the resurrection spell was just drowsiness. Nightmare was still shocked. If it was just drowsiness, what was the difference between that and no side effect? This was the resurrection spell. If a person could be resurrected just by sleeping, this ability was too frightening. Under Nightmare's shocked gaze, the white-haired man returned to his room. There was a mirror in the room. Whitehair walked to the mirror, looking somewhat tired. This was a normal symptom after using the resurrection spell. The white-haired man stared at himself in the mirror and yawned. He reached out and touched his face, a very complicated thought emerging in his mind. Why did he have to look like that person? But that person had never looked at him. Whitehair stared at his face in the mirror, slightly dazed. A moment later, a strand of hair fell and floated into the sink in front of Whitehair. It was a strand of white hair that had been separated from Whitehair's body. In fact, the side effect of using the resurrection spell wasn't just drowsiness as Nightmare had imagined. That was a spell that could completely resurrect a person, and it definitely couldn't violate the Heavenly Tao's principle of equivalent exchange. Therefore, even Whitehair had to pay a painful price. However, this price wasn't reflected in the loss of lifespan or internal injuries. Compared to the other side effects of the resurrection spell, Whitehair's side effect was actually relatively mild, but it was a little hard to accept. He stared at himself in the mirror and the strand of white hair that had fallen to the ground. He carefully picked up the strand of white hair with his slender fingers, then took out a golden needle and put the strand of white hair through the small hole behind the golden needle. Whitehair knew very well what he was doing. But he had no other choice. This was because the side effect of the resurrection spell was something he had to bear. Therefore, he looked at himself in the mirror and plucked the white hair off his head, revealing his smooth and round head that looked like a braised egg. Then, he used the golden needle to firmly sew the strand of hair onto the wig. This was a wig made from his real hair, therefore, the side effect of the resurrection spell was hair loss. Moreover, this hair loss was irreversible. Once it fell off, it would never grow back. Chapter 11:16. It was Tuesday, November 11th. Headmaster Chen led Wang Ling and the rest of the students participating in the special training class through the third major course after Understanding Spirit Plants and Understanding Opponents, actual combat training. Headmaster Chen had already spent the day picking out the key points for the first two classes. Wang Ling and the others would have to go back and flip through the lecture notes to memorize as much as possible for the rest of the content. Since this body techniques exchange event had already been upgraded to a national competition, and number 60 High was now at the stage of being approved as a key city high school, Headmaster Chen really wanted number 60 High to shine in this competition. If number 60 High could be upgraded to a higher level during his term as headmaster, it would be extremely beneficial for his future career as well as for the students and teachers here. The 8-day survival battle in the wilderness was a very arduous task. With 102 high schools across the country in such a large area as Nine Dragon Mountain, the national competition this time was significantly more challenging and dangerous than in previous years. Because the competition format for the previous year's body techniques exchange event had been small, the wilderness map chosen had been carefully considered, and wasn't as vast as Nine Dragon Mountain. But even in a relatively small area, there was still a chance that all the participating students in previous years would be wiped out. Now that everyone was on Nine Dragon Mountain, if they weren't careful at all, it was very likely that they would all die in battle. Headmaster Chen couldn't share much of his experience with the survival battle in the wilderness. For this reason, he had used his connections to invite a special teacher. He was an active soldier from the magnificent immortal special forces, San Yuan. He was a man wrapped up from head to toe and dressed like a brocade guard. There was a metal mask on the lower half of his face, with the symbol of the magnificent immortal engraved on it. From his eyes, San Yuan also had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. Clearly, he wasn't covering himself because he was ugly. This was probably due to some kind of confidentiality agreement which prevented San Yuan from completely revealing his true appearance. Everyone was amazed and couldn't help but sigh at Headmaster Chen's powerful connections. This was a member of the magnificent immortal special forces, the most famous special forces in Huaxiao Nation. They had carried out many major missions for the country. President Qi had previously borrowed Jai Yin to be Wang Ming's bodyguard, but that was President Qi, one of the 10 generals of Huaxiao Nation, and it was actually very easy for him to transfer someone. But Wang Ling hadn't expected Headmaster Chen to have such powerful connections. What's more, San Yuan was actually on vacation. In essence, he was someone who was resting. He had clearly given Headmaster Chen a lot of face by agreeing to teach him. Thank you for your hard work, Brother San Yuan. Headmaster Chen smiled and patted San Yuan on the shoulder. San Yuan stood ramrod straight from beginning to end, maintaining the excellent military posture of a member of the Special Forces. It wasn't just the students in the special training class. Many of the students who were taking a walk and relaxing in the field after class also saw San Yuan's extremely solemn silhouette in the distance. This group of people in the special training class is too lucky. They can actually be taught by the magnificent immortal special forces. Are they really from Magnificent Immortal? I thought it was cosplay. No one dares to cosplay this. They'll be caught for tea. Hey. So envious. It's my fault for not being strong enough to be chosen. Can I take photos? As soon as the student took out his phone, San Yuan's gaze followed the phone's lens and swept over him. The astonishing pressure of his gaze made the boy so scared that he stiffened all over, and in a moment of carelessness, he directly dropped his phone on the ground. Seeing this scene, Headmaster Chen hurriedly apologized. Sorry, San Yuan, it was my oversight. I'll text the teachers and keep an eye on the students' phones for the time being. Don't worry, the school's surveillance cameras were turned off when you came, so there won't be any video of you. Sorry for the trouble. San Yuan's magnetic male voice came from under the iron mask. After taking a deep breath, San Yuan started to face the crowd. Today, Headmaster Chen asked me to teach you. Do you know what the first thing you need to survive in the wild is? Food and water, Super Chen replied. That's right. This is a problem that everyone has to face in the wild. Speaking up to this point, San Yuan started to talk about what he was going to teach today. But your challenge this time is even more difficult. Not only do you have to find the right food and water, you also have to think of a way to cleverly fight the teams from other schools in the process. So today's first lesson is relatively simple. It's just to eat. You need to put the food into your mouth as quickly as possible and then eat it. Eat? Hero Guo laughed. What's there to teach? It does look very simple, but my lesson is a little different. The difficulty level will increase later. After San Yuan said that, a spirit light flashed in his hand, and a sparkling and translucent spirit fruit appeared. This spirit fruit was very large, the size of a coconut. It's a blue crystal fruit. Super Chen immediately recognized it. They had already taken a spirit plants class yesterday, so they quickly recognized this fruit. The blue crystal fruit was a specialty of 9 Dragon Mountain. It was large and plentiful, and in addition to replenishing the body's water supply and filling the stomach, it could also replenish the body's spirit energy. Furthermore, the core of the blue crystal fruit could be ground into powder and applied to wounds, which could also stop pain and bleeding. This was a fruit that had many uses. However, the conditions for the growth of the blue crystal fruit were a little harsh, and it wasn't available in all areas. When Headmaster Chen had talked about this yesterday, he had already sensed that the areas where the blue crystal fruit was produced were very likely to become war zones where student teams competed for resources after the body technique exchange meet. San Yuan said, "In our special forces, there are times when we don't have enough fasting pills for combat, and we look for suitable resources in the wild to replenish our strength. However, many edible spirit plants in the cultivation world are very large. In order not to delay the battle, we have undergone strict training to eat at the speed at which we eat. Like this blue crystal fruit." Speaking up to this point, San Yuan had already put one hand on his mask. Xiao, in the blink of an eye, the next moment, the blue crystal fruit the size of a coconut in his hand completely disappeared. "San Yuan, as you can see, in that half a second, I took off my mask, ate the whole blue crystal fruit, and then put my mask back on." Everyone? Of course, the speed at which you eat can only be trained for a long time. You don't need to have the speed of our special forces. Today, everyone's mission was to eat this blue crystal fruit within 5 seconds. If you don't do it in time, you'll have to start over. San Yuan waved his hand and gave everyone a fruit. "Now, let's start." Chapter 11:17. It was clearly unrealistic to eat a coconut-sized spirit fruit in 5 seconds. The truth was that Wang Ling had been using his king's eye to clearly analyze everything in front of him as San Yuan had performed. San Yuan did not actually eat the blue crystal fruit. Instead, he used some kind of spell to absorb the blue crystal fruit into his body. It was probably a kind of devouring spell. The essence of eating was to provide energy for the body. As a member of the Special Forces, San Yuan didn't care at all what food tasted like. As long as it provided the body with the nutrients it needed and quickly replenished its physical strength and spirit power, everything else was just ordinary protein to him. But Wang Ling had to admit that San Yuan was indeed astonishingly fast. He took off his mask and swiftly used the devouring spell to vaporize and absorb the blue crystal fruit through his pores. It looked like he had eaten it in an instant. This was a breathing method. The downside was that you couldn't enjoy the food itself, but the point was that it could quickly replenish your physical strength. And most importantly, you wouldn't feel bloated. After all, the stomach's capacity was limited. If you kept eating without restraint, you wouldn't be able to complete the mission even if you ate until you died. So the truth was that San Yuan's hint was already very obvious. Their training mission today was to eat the fruit in the shortest possible time. If they relied purely on normal food to achieve their goal, it would be very difficult to achieve the final result. Wang Ling could see this, and so could Wang Zhen and the others, but they couldn't make it too obvious. But when all was said and done, they were elites who had been carefully selected from number 60 high school. Although there were a lot of hidden bigwigs in this competition class, these genuine elite students weren't just for show. Lotus Sun, Super Chin, Xia Ming, Hirogua, and the others quickly realized what was going on. And it was Li Yuyue who had first suggested this idea. Teacher San Yuan probably didn't really eat the fruit with his mouth, right? Li Yuyue smiled with curved eyebrows. This girl was the one Wang Ling had mentioned before. She was in the same class as Fang Xing and Xia Ming. Furthermore, she was the class monitor in Fang Xing's class and had outstanding grades. Wang Ling had heard that Li Yoyue's family was in the food and beverage business, and she had done her own research on cooking. As the class monitor of Class 3, Lotus Sun wasn't as unfamiliar with Li Yuyue as Wang Ling was. After all, there were many ways for girls to develop feelings for each other. Going to the bathroom hand in hand and having lunch together are all good ways to promote friendship. I heard my grandfather say that the existence of delicious food makes people feel happy. Therefore, cooking food as delicious as possible was not only a way to respect the food, but also a way to make the people who ate the food feel happy. Those who don't enjoy their food are insulting and trampling on life. Li Yuyue swayed her ponytail. There was a special kind of spirit in it, which stemmed from her respect for food and confidence in her cooking. Wang Ling felt that it was all too familiar. He had once sensed the exact same aura from Old Man Wang. People who could make delicious food usually had a good personality. Li Yuyue was obviously a sunny and cheerful girl. But my grandfather also said that there's a special case. Only those who have been silently carrying the burden for the people for many years in order to build the great rivers and mountains. Only they have the right to put more energy into other areas. Saying this, Li Yuyue turned her gaze to San Yuan. Teacher San Yuan, in order to save time and devote more energy to missions, it's probably been a long time since you've carefully tasted the taste of the food itself. After saying this, Li Yuyue didn't intend to continue playing with her words. After all, there was a time limit for the training, so she immediately told everyone what she had guessed. My father said that in the wild, professional soldiers often use a special method to speed up the digestion and absorption of food. There's a general category of this method called the devouring spell. Hearing this, San Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly. To be honest, he was a little surprised that number 60 high school students could so quickly figure out the key points of the special training. When Headmaster Chen had found him, he had already planned out the special training for the next few days. Food was just the first and simplest lesson in the special training plan. But considering the overall level of number 60 high school compared to other schools, San Yuan felt that it would take them some time to see through his smokescreen, even if they were students from the elite class. He didn't expect that his trick would be immediately seen through by a student. Seeing San Yuan's astonished expression, Li Yuyue was even more certain of her guess. Looking at teacher San Yuan's expression, I'm probably right. Also, judging from the way teacher San Yuan absorbed the food just now, this devouring spell should be a way to absorb energy through the pores. It's also known as the pore devouring spell. Judging from teacher San Yuan's absorption speed, I'm 100% certain that he has already cultivated it to the top level. That's right. I didn't expect you to see through it so quickly. Under the mask, San Yuan gave a gratified smile. It seems that you know far more than I thought. It's just an accumulation of extracurricular knowledge. I believe that the other students know this as well. After saying this, Li Yuyue stepped back to one side. San Yuan shrugged helplessly and took out another blue crystal fruit. Now, I'll teach you in slow motion. Everyone just needs to follow suit. The pore devouring spell isn't difficult, but if you want to cultivate it to my level, you'll have to spend a lot of time studying and practicing hard. Everyone, work hard. But as soon as San Yuan said this, Lotus Sun had already used the pore devouring spell on the other side to absorb the blue crystal fruit in her hand. Teacher San Yuan, is it like this? Lotus Sun asked humbly. Although this process wasn't as fast as San Yuan's, he was still taken aback. Has student Lotus Sun learned it before? No, I saw it the first time teacher San Yuan demonstrated it. The corner of San Yuan's mouth twitched. The first time, he hadn't taught them the first time. He had just demonstrated it in passing. San Yuan felt that he had been deceived by Headmaster Chen. Because when Headmaster Chen had come to look for him, he had clearly told him that this was the worst batch of students he had ever taught. In the end, this rotten old man was very bad. Chapter 11:18. Teaching and learning helped each other, and in the process of teaching, one could also grow. San Yuan agreed to help, and at the same time, he could review some of the knowledge he had learned before. Studying the old and learning the new, and gaining new inspiration and breakthroughs in magic through teaching and educating people could actually be considered a path. This was also why some grandmasters liked to find stupid disciples to teach. The harder they taught, the more enlightenment they would gain. Moreover, according to the latest research data, the probability of teachers in the world of cultivators making new breakthroughs in spell structure is 7 to 15% higher than that of orthodox cultivators. San Yuan had come to number 60 high for the new enlightenment he had gained from teaching, but in the end, he realized that the students in this special training class were actually smarter than the next. Teacher San Yuan, is that so? Wang Zhen pretended to be timid as he performed the devouring spell in front of everyone. Furthermore, his absorption speed was so fast that it was almost on par with San Yuan's. Well done. San Yuan's face twitched slightly under his mask. He had never thought that the students of number 60 high would be so talented in cultivation. San Yuan had heard of quite a few famous schools participating in the national competition this time. Based on the ranking of their combat strength, San Yuan thought that number 60 high would be lucky to be able to enter the top 50. But after interacting with them this time, San Yuan had to admit that he had been wrong. The students of number 60 high were much stronger than he had imagined. Since everyone has learned it, let's move on to the next lesson. After saying that, San Yuan gave everyone a pair of black sunglasses. What's this? It's an entertainment program for us during special training. I specially borrowed it this time. Its full name is Mountain River Construction Mirror. It used to be very valuable, but now it's a mass-produced magic treasure. But you still have to return it to me after you're done with it. San Yuan said, simply put, this pair of glasses will synchronize everyone's mental networks. I've already set the glasses in my hand as the main glasses. That is to say, after you put on the glasses, you can follow me into my mental world. After San Yuan said this, everyone nodded. He had also guessed that the next lesson would be the actual combat lesson. He had been wondering whether he should go easy on them, but now that San Yuan had given him the glasses to synchronize his mental power, he instantly relaxed a lot. In the spiritual world, even if he accidentally lost control of his strength, it wouldn't directly threaten a person's life. It should still be rather safe. This time, we will be using a one-on-one challenge mode. You will need to challenge 6 people, and the final 6th lord, which is me, will be me. As long as you defeat 6 people, today's test will be considered complete, San Yuan said. In fact, this was tomorrow's training, but unfortunately, Wang Ling and the others' performance had been too outstanding, so the body technique training had to be brought forward. As for the checkpoints, they had been set up beforehand. San Yuan remembered them all. As long as he did a good job of controlling the situation, there would be no problem. This was just a group of high school students from a key district high school. San Yuan felt that as a professional cultivator special forces soldier, he would be able to handle them. We only need to defeat the Pass Lord. There is a time limit to defeating them. If you exceed the time limit, you will have to start from the beginning. San Yuan said, everyone needs to closely observe the actions of every Pass Lord when clearing the levels. They all have their flaws and weaknesses. As long as you grasp onto them, it will be very easy to clear the levels. Wang Ling fell silent. Judging from San Yuan's description, the body technique test this time wasn't so much about cultivating body techniques as it was about developing observation skills. Observational skills were also an important lesson for cultivators in the study of body techniques. In body technique duels, more and more classic cases proved that sometimes it wasn't always the side with the upper hand who had the upper hand who would win. Strength was just an advantage, but to turn it into victory, one also needed to combine one's own experience and the ability to observe in an instant. Powerful body technique cultivators had extremely good observation skills. Some could even catch an opponent's flaw in the instant they punched. Even if they weren't as strong as their opponent, they could combine their observation skills with their speed to attack their vitals. This was how it was said that, there is nothing in the world of martial arts that can't be overcome, but speed. But to have this kind of observation and speed, it was far from enough to rely on reflexes alone. This was a natural reflex that formed muscle memory after years of training. It might seem like those international kung fu masters could detect something in an instant, but it was actually more of a conditioned reflex. But there was a certain difference between real body techniques and traditional martial arts. For example, in traditional Tai Chi and Wing Chun, many of the lethal moves had already been toned down. The reason why traditional martial arts could survive to this day was because of the spirit of martial arts and morality, as well as the effect of strengthening the body. But there were always people who didn't know their place. Some self-proclaimed kung fu masters liked to fight on the stage of mixed martial arts and used these self-cultivation martial arts to fight, but in the end, they only humiliated themselves. But Wang Ling always felt that it was necessary to pass on traditional martial arts. Furthermore, traditional martial arts and mixed martial arts had their own advantages. Although Sonda could win in a match, the training of this boxing technique would cause damage to the body, and it would accumulate over the years. In the end, it was still the cultivators who used traditional martial arts to cultivate their bodies who lived longer. Wang Ling put on his sunglasses. At that moment, there were a lot of questions in his mind from Gu Xuanji, Wang Zhen, and the others. This was their first time pretending to be high school students, and they weren't too sure what level they should reach for this kind of test. Gu Xuanji, Senior, should we pretend a little? It's better not to go overboard. If we're at the level of an outstanding high school student, how about 10 rounds to determine the winner? Wang Ling, Wang Zhen, that's not enough. I think it's safer to add another 5 rounds. Also, it should be better if we put on an act. Didn't teacher Sanyuan say that we should look for flaws? We should be able to see everyone's situation, right? That's right, it's better to put on an act. Jin Yuan also agreed with this view. We have to put on an act, otherwise it'll be too fake. At that moment, Lu Qingyi also said, why would we need to look for flaws in a showdown at this level? One punch should be enough to settle it, right? Wang Ling, Lu Qingyi's words were in fact true. Although not all cultivators with an advantage in strength could win in the end, if the gap in strength was too large, that is, if one side had absolute strength, there would be no suspense in the outcome. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.